The Healing Convenience Store. Chapter 1. A Meal That Starts It All. The train was passing Pyeongtaek when Mrs. Yeom Young-suk realized the little bag that should have been in her overnight case was missing. She was supposed to be in Busan today, but how could she go without her wallet? The problem was that she couldn't remember where she'd lost it. More than anything, it was her forgetfulness that upset her. She broke out in a cold sweat, frantically retracing her steps in her mind. She'd still had it when she bought her KTX train ticket at Seoul Station. How else would she have paid for the ticket without getting her credit card from her wallet, which she always kept in her little bag? After that, she'd sat in the waiting room in front of the TV screen for half an hour, watching the 24-hour news channel. On the train, she dozed off while clutching her overnight bag, and when she woke up, everything had been exactly as it was. It was only at that moment, as she was retrieving her cell phone, that she realized her little bag was gone. At the thought that all her important items were inside, wallet, bank book, and notebook, she could hardly breathe. Urging the gears in her head to keep up with the racing train, she revisited her memories, trying to rewind the day. When she kept shaking her leg and mumbling to herself, the middle-aged man sitting next to her cleared his throat loudly. However, it wasn't him, but her cell phone, ringing from inside her bag, that broke through her panic. The ringtone was an ABBA song, but she couldn't recall the title. Was it Chiquitita or Dancing Queen? Oh, Junhui, maybe your granny does have dementia after all. Only when she'd pulled out her phone with shaking hands did the title finally come to her. Thank you for the music. Right then on her call screen, she saw an unfamiliar number with an 802 Seoul area code. She took a deep breath and answered. Hello? No one spoke on the other end, but she could tell by the background noise that the caller was in a public area. Excuse me, but who's this? She asked. Is this Yeom Young-suk? She struggled to understand his hoarse mumble. If a bear were to emerge from a cave after a long winter sleep and speak, she imagined it would sound like this. Yes, speaking. Your wallet. Oh yes, you found it? Where are you right now? Seoul. Where in Seoul? Are you at Seoul Station by any chance? Yes, see Seoul Station. She heaved a sigh of relief and cleared her throat. Thank you for calling. I'm on the train right now, but I'll get off at the next stop and head right back. Can you hold on to it for me or leave it with someone? I'll be sure to compensate you as soon as I get there. I'll stay here. Got nowhere to go. I see. Where should I meet you? Where you take the Airport Express. By GS Convenience. Thank you. I'll be there as soon as possible. No need to rush. All right, thank you. When she hung up, she felt a little funny. His slurred, raspy voice suggested he'd been drinking. She wondered if he might be one of the unhoused men who hung out near the station, especially given what he'd said about having nowhere to go. The fact that he was calling from an 02 number, likely a payphone, also seemed to confirm he had no cell phone of his own. Suddenly, she felt nervous. Although he was returning her wallet, she couldn't shake the feeling that he might want more than the reward she was offering. Still, she reminded herself, it was doubtful someone who would go out of his way to return her wallet would harm her. Giving him the 40,000 won in her wallet as a thank you would be more than enough. Just then, Cheonan Station was announced as the next stop, where she could switch to return to Seoul Station. Mrs. Yeom placed her phone back in her overnight case and stood up. As her return train passed Suwon, her phone rang again. She checked the caller ID, chanting the lyrics of "Thank you for the music" under her breath, as if warding off dementia. It was the same 802 number. She answered, trying to ignore her unease. He began in his defeated voice. "Yes, go on," she urged. She heard herself using the same stern tone from managing students years earlier. "Ma'am, I'm hungry. A lunchbox. From the store. Is it okay?" Her heart warmed instantly. Her suspicion melted away at the words, "ma'am" and "lunchbox." "Sure, get yourself a meal. And why don't you get a beverage, too, since you must be thirsty?" Thank you. Shortly after she hung up, a notification for a card charge appeared on her phone. It had happened very quickly. He must have been standing at the store counter when he'd called. His hunger solidified her belief that he was indeed homeless. Reviewing the charge, she noted the details. G.S. Chan Ho Park the Ace Lunch Box, 4901. So he didn't splurge on a beverage. At least he has some restraint. She had considered asking someone to accompany her for safety, but decided against it. At 70, despite showing symptoms of dementia, she still had faith in herself. Throughout her teaching career, she had never been timid, handling all kinds of students with confidence right up until the day she retired. She would trust herself now, too. At Seoul Station, she immediately located the escalator leading down to the airport express trains. As soon as she descended, she saw a GS Convenience to her right and a man hunched over by the entrance, his face buried in a lunchbox. She grew nervous as each step brought him more clearly into view. He had a mop of long, matted hair and wore a thin windbreaker and cotton trousers, so dirty she couldn't tell if they were beige or brown. There he was, gingerly picking up a cocktail sausage with chopsticks and putting it into his mouth. She was right. He was homeless. Steeling herself, she walked toward him. As she approached, 3 men appeared suddenly and rushed toward him. Mrs. Yum was so shocked she stopped in her tracks. The men pounced on him, pinning him to the ground, trying to snatch something from his hands. She looked around frantically, but those passing by merely cast brief glances, indifferent to a scuffle among homeless people. The man dropped his food and curled up to protect himself, but the others choked him and forced his arm up, wresting away what he'd been holding. Mrs. Yum, who had been watching anxiously, caught a glimpse of the object. It was her pink bag. The 3 attackers kicked the man several times before starting to flee. Mrs. Yum's hands and legs trembled so violently that she collapsed to the ground. Just then, the man got up and lunged at the one holding the bag, launching a counterattack. The man shouted, wrapping his arms around the thief's legs and knocking him down. As soon as he smashed the thief to the ground and yanked the bag out of his hands, the other 2 jumped on him. In that moment, fury overtook Mrs. Yum. She sprang up and charged at them, yelling, "You bastards! Let go of that this instant!" They froze at her sudden appearance. She raised her overnight bag and brought it down on the first thief's head. When he yelped in pain, the other 2 started backing away. "Thieves! They're stealing my wallet! Stop them!" At Mrs. Yum's shrieks, people finally began to pay attention. They stopped to stare, and the thieves ran off. Only the lunchbox man remained on the ground, curled up in fetal position, clutching the bag. She approached him. "Are you okay?" He lifted his head to gaze up at her. With blood and snot running from his nose, eyes swelling from punches, and a mouth hidden beneath a scraggly beard, he resembled a caveman returning injured from a hunt. He slowly sat up, seeming to realize only then that his attackers were gone. She fished out a handkerchief and crouched in front of him. A musty stench hit her nostrils. Holding her breath, she offered him the handkerchief, but he shook his head and wiped his nose with his jacket sleeve. She worried he would get blood and snot on her pink bag, then grew frustrated at her own shallowness. "Are you sure you're okay?" He nodded, examining her carefully. Under his scrutiny, she felt nervous, as if she'd done something wrong. She wanted to leave as quickly as possible. It was time to retrieve her bag and be on her way. "Thank you for keeping it safe," she said. He plucked the bag out from under his arm and held it out to her. But just as she reached for it, he pulled it back. He studied her carefully as he opened the zipper. "What do you think you're doing? You sure you're the owner?" "Of course I am. That's why I'm here. Don't you remember talking to me on the phone?" Her mood was on the verge of souring at his absurd suspicion. Without saying another word, he dug inside, found her wallet, and took out her ID. "Your N name and birthday. You think I'm lying right now? I have to make sure I have a responsibility to return it. Why don't you check my picture? It's right there on the ID." He blinked his puffy eyes, glancing from her to the ID. "It doesn't look like you." Stunned, she clicked her tongue, not even angry. "The picture is too old," he added. It was an old picture, all right, but her face should have been easily recognizable to anyone, which meant that there was something wrong with the man's vision, or that she'd aged beyond recognition. "So, what's your birthday?" She heaved a short sigh and exaggerated each syllable. "July 25th, 1952. Happy? Good, good. I've got to make sure, don't I?" Looking at her as if he wanted her to agree, he slipped the ID back into her wallet, the wallet into the bag, and handed the bag to her. As the chaos finally settled, gratitude swept over her. He had kept her valuables safe, even while being assaulted by those thieves, and had even verified her identity to ensure she was the rightful owner. It was clear he took his responsibility seriously. The man rose to his feet with a groan. She also stood and fished out 40,000 won. "Here," she said, holding out the bills. When he didn't reach for the money, she insisted, "Take it." Instead, he thrust his hand into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled ball of tissue. He wiped his bloody nose with it, then turned and started walking away. She stared after him for a long time, the bills still in her outstretched hand. He tottered to the front of the store where he'd been eating earlier and squatted on his heels. She followed him. He was mumbling to himself, gazing at the contents of the lunchbox scattered on the ground. She heard him groan. Eventually, she bent down and tapped his back. When he turned, she softened her expression, the same one she'd always used to console timid students. "Hey, mister, can you come with me for a bit?" As soon as they stepped out onto the street, the man shrank back, more comfortable in the safety of the station. She gestured to him, urging him forward, and finally got him to leave Seoul Station. They walked in silence along the streets of Garwol Dong. He followed, staying a few paces behind as she shuffled toward Cheongpa-dong. She wondered why she'd asked him to come with her. She wanted to repay him somehow, this man who had refused his rightful reward, for keeping her bag safe and for doing the right thing despite his circumstances. More than anything, as a lifelong Christian, she wanted to be a good Samaritan to this man, just as he'd been to her. 15 minutes later, they left the drab streets around Seoul Station, and a large, ornate church came into view. Students from the nearby women's college, dressed in jeans and jackets, walked past them giggling, while a long line stretched in front of a fast food joint that had blown up after being featured on TV. Mrs. Yum looked back to find the man glancing about in bewilderment. Some people avoided them, keeping a wide berth. She felt both anxious and curious about what the passers-by might be thinking. After all, Cheongpa-dong was her neighborhood and also where her business was located. She had a reputation to keep up. Nevertheless, Mrs. Yum led the man toward Sukmyung Women's University, past 2 side streets, and arrived at a 3-way intersection. The convenience store at the intersection was her business, where she could offer him a new lunchbox. She opened the door and gestured for him to come inside. He hesitated and then followed her in. "Hello. You're back already?" Sion, one of her part-time employees, put down her cell phone and greeted Mrs. Yom with a smile. Smiling back, Mrs. Yom noticed the girl's face stiffen. "It's okay. He's a customer." Sion peered at the man, narrowing her eyes. The girl still had much to learn. Mrs. Yom guided him by the arm toward the lunchbox cooler. He followed without a word. "Pick one. Anything you'd like." He looked at her in confusion, but remained silent. "This is my store, so don't feel bad, just pick one." Then, huh? What's wrong? Don't you like any of them? But there's no Chanho P. Park lunchboxes. This isn't GS Convenience. Only GS sells those. We have plenty of tasty lunchboxes too. But Chanho Park ones are the best. Baffled by his fixation on a competitor's product, she picked up the largest lunchbox from the cooler and handed it to him. "Try this. The ultimate feast. It comes with a lot of banchan." Holding the lunchbox, he carefully counted the number of sides. "That's 12 items, you rascal. A royal spread," she said in her head as she watched him study the contents. Once he finished his inspection, he looked up, bowed deeply to her, and then headed outside to the green plastic patio table, as if it were reserved just for him. The patio table soon became his private spot. Mrs. Yom watched him open the lunchbox lid as if handling a precious object, carefully break apart the disposable chopsticks, and shovel some rice into his mouth. She went back inside to fetch a cup of doenjang soup, setting it on the counter. Quick as usual, Sion scanned the barcode without question. Mrs. Yom poured hot water into the cup, got a spoon, and headed back outside. "Here, it's better with soup." He glanced from her face to the doenjang soup she placed on the table. Before she could hand him the spoon, he raised the cup to his lips and drank nearly half, seemingly unfazed by the scalding liquid. Nodding in satisfaction, he resumed eating. Mrs. Yom sat across from him, watching him eat. He reminded her of a bear with a jar of honey. It was probably difficult for a homeless person to eat 3 meals a day, so how did this man manage to be so big? "Easy there, slow down, no one's going to steal your food." He looked up at Mrs. Yom, grease from the stir-fried kimchi smeared across his mouth. His eyes, no longer guarded, appeared meek. "It's good." He glanced at the lid. "It really is. The ultimate." Instead of finishing his sentence, he bowed to her once more and took another sip of soup. He seemed much calmer now that his stomach was full. Mrs. Yom felt a strange sense of satisfaction watching him eat. She noticed a quiet dignity in his struggle to pick up the last few pieces of fish cake. "From now on, come here when you're hungry. You can have a lunch box any time." He looked wide-eyed at her, his chopsticks frozen in midair. "I'll let the employees know. You don't have to pay for it." "The expired ones?" "No, the new ones. Why would you eat something that's expired?" "The workers. They eat expired ones. I don't mind." "Nobody eats expired food here. Not the workers, and not you. Have the fresh ones. I'll make sure everyone knows." He considered it for a long moment, then bowed again without responding and went back to picking up the fish cake. Only then did Mrs. Yom remember to hand him the spoon she was holding. He stared at it for a few seconds, as if unsure what it was for. Finally, he used the spoon to scrape together the remaining pieces, the muscle memory returning like the act of riding a bike, and, with contentment, brought the spoon to his mouth. After polishing off the lunchbox, he looked up at Mrs. Yom. "That was good. Thank you. I should be the one thanking you for keeping my bag and wallet safe. They stole it, you know. There were 2 of them." 2 of them. So I gave them a bee beating and got it. The pink bag with your Woo wallet. You mean you got my bag from those thieves? Just to return it to me?" He nodded and sipped the water she'd brought him. "I can handle 2, but 3's hard. I'll teach them a lesson next time," he said, gritting his teeth. She cringed at the sight of the chili pepper flakes stuck between his yellow teeth. But more than that, she was impressed with his bravery. He finished his water and glanced around. Where are we?" "Oh, we're in Chungpadong, Green Hills." "Green Hills? It's nice here." A corner of his mouth turned up in a smile under his thick beard. He picked up the empty containers and got to his feet. With practiced ease, he tossed them into the recycling bin, then stood before her again, pulling a wad of tissue from his jacket to wipe his mouth. After bowing deeply from the waist, he left. She watched him walk back in the direction of Seoul Station, like an office worker heading home after a long day. As soon as she stepped back inside the store, Sion fired off question after question, with eyes full of curiosity. Mrs. Yom recounted everything, from the moment on the train when she realized her bag was missing to now. Throughout the story, Sion interjected with astonishment and concern. He's an interesting character, a man of principle. It's hard to believe he's homeless. "I don't know, boss. He looked like just another homeless person to me." "Did you check to see if anything's missing?" She opened the pink bag. Everything was in place. She smiled at Sion, as if to say, "I told you so." Suddenly, she took out her ID and held it up to the girl's face. "Be honest. Do I look different to you?" "No, except for a bit of white hair. You haven't aged at all." Mrs. Yom peered closely at her photo. "He's right." "Pardon me?" "Yup, he's a man of principle, all right." She laughed. "And you're too nice." She told Sion to give him a lunchbox if he came to the store and to inform the rest of the staff to do the same. Although Sion didn't look too pleased, she began typing the boss's instructions into the group chat. Mrs. Yum glanced around the store with satisfaction, but her heart sank when she realized she couldn't recall any of the customers who had come in while she was dealing with the man. The thought that she might indeed have dementia left a bitter taste in her mouth. Nevertheless, she had received kindness and given it in return. She decided to consider it a decent day. Sion cleared her throat politely. "But Mrs. Yom, aren't you supposed to go to Busan?" "I go, what am I thinking?" Her cousin's funeral. The day was far from over. She still needed to get to Busan, even if it meant arriving late at night. After the funeral, she planned to stay a few extra days, since she was already making the trip. She stuffed the pink bag safely back into her overnight case and headed for Seoul Station once more. After spending 5 days in Busan, Mrs. Yom returned home, stopped by Always Convenience, and found Sion ringing up drinks for a couple. Sion greeted Mrs. Yom with a glance and came out from behind the counter after the customers left. "Boss, that man's been coming here every day. He hasn't skipped a day." "Who are you talking about? The homeless man?" "Yeah, he comes at the same time every day. He eats a lunch box and then leaves." "So he doesn't come during the other shifts?" "No, just during mine." "Maybe he likes you." Sion looked appalled and narrowed her eyes. Mrs. Yom laughed and took the girl's indignation in stride. "He always shows up at 8 p.m., right when we're supposed to throw out the expired food." "What? I told you to give him a fresh one." "I tried. I offered him a new one, but he insists on eating the expired ones." "But I promised him a new one. If he eats expired food, that makes me a liar." "It's tough, boss." He parks himself in front of the counter, mumbling and stinking up the whole place. One time, a customer walked in, saw him, and walked right back out. What am I supposed to do? Giving him what he wants is the fastest way to get him to leave. Plus, I have to air out the store every time. Hugh. Okay. He comes at 8 on purpose. I don't know how he figured it out, but he knows when we toss the expired food. I knew it. He's a man of principle. I got worried yesterday when he was late. Thought maybe he was sick or something. Seeing Sion bite her lip in worry, Mrs. Yom chuckled again. Sion, you're too soft. How will you get through life? That's funny, coming from you, Sion rebutted. Who came up with the idea to give him a lunchbox every day? What if he brings all his friends here? He's not the type to do that. How do you know? I'm a good judge of character. Why do you think I hired you? She said, winking at Sion. Touché, boss. She always enjoyed her conversations with Sion, who was like a daughter to her in many ways. She hoped Sion would pass her civil service exam soon and move on, but the thought of the girl leaving also made her sad. The door chime signaled a customer's arrival, and Sion returned to her post behind the counter. Mrs. Yum walked around the store and inspected the lunch boxes. One of these days, she decided, she'd drop by at 8 p.m., right at food disposal time. She planned to ask for his name then. That evening, Mrs. Yom nodded off while watching television and was startled awake when her phone rang. The time was midnight. Feeling a surge of frustration, she answered and heard the drunken voice of her son. He had no idea she'd gone to Busan or that her birthday was the next day, but that didn't stop him from professing his love and regret at not being a better son. Predictably, his spiel led into pointed questions about always convenience. She told him it wasn't his concern, and as usual, he pitched another grandiose scheme, suggesting she sell the struggling store and invest in his business instead. He claimed she'd have less to worry about, and her life would be so much easier. Losing patience, she decided to be blunt. Minsik, you shouldn't trick your own mother. Mom, don't you trust me? Do you really think I'd do that to you? As a retired history teacher, let me tell you something. People and nations are always judged by their past actions. Reflect on what you've done so far. Would you trust yourself if you were in my shoes? Geez, Mom, that's not fair. Aren't we family? Why do you all treat me like this? Why? If you're drunk and just want to fight, hang up. Mom, Mrs. Yom hung up herself and stormed into the kitchen. Her heart burned as if on a hot grill. Sharp pain radiated from her chest. She opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and gulped it down, attempting to extinguish the internal fire, only to end up coughing violently as the beer went down the wrong way. She felt pathetic, resorting to alcohol to drown out her son's words. What should I do? She had always tried to live her life with sound judgment and purpose, but her son's troubles constantly threw her off balance. If she sold the store to fund his latest venture or scheme and ended up losing everything, what then? Her only remaining asset was this old 2-bedroom condo on the 3rd floor of a faded low-rise that had stood in the hills of Cheongpa-dong for the past 20 years. Her son's failures wouldn't end until he swallowed up her last asset, this place that was supposed to be her final haven. It pained her to admit it, but her own son was a fool and a fraud. His ex-wife must have seen the truth as she filed for divorce after less than 2 years of marriage. Initially, Mrs. Yom had been angry at her daughter-in-law's apparent heartlessness, but she soon came to accept the fact that her son was mostly to blame. It took him only 3 years after the divorce to lose all his money, becoming more pitiful with each passing day. And now, when only a mother could help, what was she doing? She was concerned about a homeless person from Seoul Station, wondering if he had enough to eat, rather than looking after her own son, who was out in the world, drunk and struggling to survive. She finished her beer and began to pray at the kitchen table. Prayer and petition were all she could do. Mrs. Yom spent her birthday with her daughter, son-in-law and granddaughter, Junhee, who was her pride and joy. This time, her daughter's family didn't come to Cheongpadong, but invited her to a fancy Korean BBQ restaurant in their neighborhood. Both she and her daughter's family lived in Yongsan, but their neighborhoods were worlds apart. Although Yongsan had become Seoul's second most expensive district after Gangnam, Mrs. Yom's Cheongpadong remained a humble area, filled with old villas packed together and boarding houses for college girls. Her daughter and son-in-law often talked about saving enough to move to Gangnam's most affluent neighborhood by the time Junhee started middle school. Mrs. Yum sometimes wondered which of the two was more responsible for their ambitious financial goals and savvy housekeeping, as these sharply contrasted with her own fiscally conservative views. She came to realize that their success was the result of the couple's unique synergy. Her daughter had changed significantly since getting married. Even their conversations had shifted to the point where her daughter felt less familiar and her son-in-law more aloof. Of course, she worried less about her very capable daughter than her divorced son. Still, Mrs. Yom sensed that the distance between her and her daughter would only grow once the couple moved to Gangnam. And now, here they were, celebrating Mrs. Yom's birthday with prime Korean beef at an upscale restaurant. To be honest, she found it somewhat uncomfortable. They used to always get baby back ribs near Sukmyung Women's University in her neighborhood. Feeling awkward, Mrs. Yom gazed at her granddaughter and smiled. Junhee was busy watching a YouTube video on her cell phone and hardly noticed her grandmother, but it made Mrs. Yom happy just to look at her. Her daughter and son-in-law were busy discussing finances, something about installment loans or securities, which went over her head. She just wished the food would arrive quickly so she could focus on eating. It was her birthday, after all. She deserved to enjoy herself. When the food was served, she concentrated on transferring the meat to her mouth. Her daughter attended to Junhee, while her son-in-law managed the grill. After they clinked beer glasses, her daughter seized the moment to say, "Guess what? Junhee is going to start taekwondo soon." Why does a girl need to learn taekwondo? Mom, I can't believe an educated, progressive woman like you would say that. What does being a girl have to do with learning taekwondo? A boy in Junhee's class hit her. She wants to learn taekwondo so she can defend herself from bullies. She was right. These old-fashioned thoughts were embarrassing. While her son-in-law looked on nervously, her daughter finished her beer. Mrs. Yom glanced at Junhee and tried to relax her face into a smile. "Junhee, you want to learn taekwondo?" "Uh-huh," the girl mumbled, not looking up from the phone. "So, Mom, there's a great taekwondo school in your neighborhood. Apparently, the master was a backup on the national team. He's young and he's got an amazing teaching philosophy. I read about it on the Dongcheon Moms group." "What's the Dongcheon Moms group?" "It's an online community for moms in Dongbu, Aicheondong." "What's the matter with this master? Shouldn't he move his school to your neighborhood then? What's he doing in Cheongpadong?" "He's trying, but the rent's too high here. We can't wait for him to move, so we're sending Junhee to Cheongpadong for now. But I need your help." Suddenly, the tender beef felt tough and hard to chew. Of course, she loved spending time with her granddaughter, but not being able to decide when she'd see Junhee made her feel uneasy. Her daughter was hoping she'd look after Junhee during the 2-hour break between taekwondo and violin lessons. And since the shuttle to the violin lesson was unreliable, she wanted Mrs. Yom to take Junhee there by bus. For a retired grandmother, looking after a grandchild for a few hours shouldn't be difficult. But Mrs. Yom had her own commitments. She needed to check on the store, volunteer at her church, and transcribe English words daily to stave off dementia. When it came down to it, though, Anything concerning her daughter or granddaughter took precedence. Of course it did. In the end, Mrs. Yom agreed, as her daughter had known she would. There was no mention of compensation, but she trusted her son-in-law and her daughter to handle everything. On the bus on her way back from the restaurant, Mrs. Yom thought of her store staff. She felt at ease around them, and they seemed more like family these days, much more than her rebellious son and ambitious daughter. If she voiced any of this, her daughter would say it was bad business practice to treat one's employees like family, but this was how she felt. She wasn't asking her employees to consider her as family, nor was she making unreasonable demands, as one might with family. Mrs. Yom only felt this way because she relied on her staff more than anyone else. Mrs. O, who looked after Always Convenience in the morning, was a friend and neighbor she'd known for the past 20 years, as well as a fellow Christian. Hadn't she always treated Mrs. Yom like a big sister, sharing with her the joys and sorrows of life? And there was Sion, who worked afternoons. She was like a daughter to Mrs. Yom, which made her want to look out for the girl. Not once had she caused any headaches, other than making the occasional calculation error. Besides, Mrs. Yom felt completely indebted to the girl for staying put for almost a year, given the high turnover of part-timers. In that regard, Seong Pil, who'd worked the graveyard shift for ages, was as dependable as they come. He'd been a godsend, falling straight in her lap a year and a half ago, when Mrs. Yom had been having trouble replacing the overnight workers who kept quitting. In his mid-50s, the father of 2 children lived in a nearby semi-basement. He had been a regular, always coming in to buy cigarettes, but as soon as Mrs. Yom posted a help-wanted sign for the night shift, he'd asked if he could apply. Unemployed at the time, he'd been struggling to find work and said with conviction that he needed to contribute somehow. Sensing his desperation, Mrs. Yom had added an extra 500 won to his minimum wage, which the government had recently increased, and so he was able to take home a monthly salary of over 2 million won. Since then, he'd been working the dreaded graveyard shift. This is what she meant by family. As a business owner, she hoped they would keep working for her. However, if Sion and Seong Pil found proper full-time work and were given the opportunity to achieve their dreams, she planned to send them off happily. Once, she'd even referred Sion for a good job, though the girl had come back right away, unable to last a full day. She vividly recalled Sion asking for her old job back, saying, "I don't think I'm ready to work at an office." University students worked weekends, and those from the young adult group at her church covered odd shifts during the week. Now that she had a pool of part-timers who wanted to work just a few days a week for pocket money, Mrs. Yom didn't need to fill as many shifts herself, and it gave her a break from the constant challenge of finding workers. She remained amazed and grateful whenever her staff called her boss and took care of the store. There was just one problem. Business wasn't great. Mrs. Yom could manage on her teacher's pension, but she had decided to run a convenience store on the advice of her younger brother when she'd been considering what to do with the money her husband had left her. Her brother, who owned 3 convenience stores, insisted she had to expand to at least 3 stores to be profitable. But for Mrs. Yom, managing one was enough. As long as she could live on her pension and her employees could earn a living, that was enough for her. She hadn't anticipated this outcome, but now Mrs. O and Seong Pil depended on the store for their livelihood. Plus, Sion needed this job while she prepared to take the civil service exam. Thus, Mrs. Yom, who'd never owned a business or been self-employed, couldn't help but worry about the store when she realized its importance, not just for her, but for her entire staff. Initially, business had been very good, but 6 months later, 2 different convenience stores opened within 100 yards of Always Convenience, leading to fierce competition. As these stores staged aggressive events and promotions, trying to outsell each other, Mrs. Yam's store experienced a sharp decline in sales. This was where she now found herself. Mrs. Yam wasn't trying to make a fortune. Her biggest worry was that her employees would be out of work if her store closed. She hadn't foreseen such intense competition when she started the business, and in all honesty, she didn't know how much longer she could stay open. These were her daily worries, but for now, there wasn't much she could do. The next day, Mrs. Yam stopped by the store at 8 o'clock in the evening and found the homeless man cleaning the table outside. Hunched over in the autumn chill, he was picking up cigarette butts, paper cups, and empty beer cans from the ground. Though he moved sluggishly, he took the trash to the bins and examined each item before disposing of it in the appropriate bin. Just then, Sion stepped out of the store with a lunchbox, placed it on the table, and gestured to him. He acknowledged her with a sloppy bow. She bowed as well, and as she turned to go back inside, noticed Mrs. Yam. "Oh, boss! Bringing him a lunchbox, I see. Well, it's the least I can do since he helps with the cleaning and all." Sion grinned and went back inside, and Mrs. Yam turned her attention back to the homeless man. This time he saw her and bowed, then opened the lid of the lunchbox. Without a word, she sat across from him. Steam rose from the lunchbox, as if it had been heated in the microwave. He seemed uncomfortable with her sitting there. When she gestured for him to go ahead and eat, he tore the paper wrapper off the chopsticks and took a green glass bottle from his jacket pocket. He unscrewed the cap from the soju bottle and poured the alcohol into a paper cup he hadn't thrown away. Mrs. Yam sat across from him in companionable silence, and eventually he seemed to relax, focusing on his meal instead of her presence. When he was nearly finished, she went into the store and came out with 2 cups of coffee. She took her seat again and handed him a cup, much to his surprise. With his head bowed, he drank it as if it were honey. Mrs. Yam sipped hers, too. The warm coffee seemed to melt away the bleakness of the weather. In the summer months, residents complained about customers smoking or being too loud while having a beer, and it was difficult to keep the area clean. Despite the complaints, though, she couldn't bring herself to get rid of the patio table, one of the few places where people could sit and take a break. "It's cold, isn't it?" She looked at the man in shock, as if a ghost had spoken to her. Since he hadn't said a word while eating, she'd assumed he wasn't one for conversation and hadn't asked his name. But now that he'd spoken first, she felt her curiosity rising. "It sure is. Are you planning to stay at Seoul Station?" "I should, since it'll get colder." He seemed much more at ease than before. Perhaps coming to the store for lunch boxes had forced him to socialize more. She decided to use this opportunity to ask as many questions as she could. "Is this the only thing you eat all day?" "The church service gives you lunch, but they make you sing hymns." "I don't like that." "Well, I wouldn't like that either." "Where did you used to live? Have you thought about going back?" "I don't know." "Then can I at least have your name?" "I don't know." "You mean you don't know your own name? What do people call you? What did you used to do?" "I don't know." At least he was speaking. But why wouldn't he answer her questions? Mrs. Yam, usually very perceptive, couldn't tell if he genuinely didn't know his name or was just pretending. Still, she decided to press on. To communicate, she needed to know a name to use at least. "Then what should I call you?" Instead of answering, he looked towards Seoul Station. Did he want to go back there, to a familiar place? He then turned and looked her in the eyes. "Doc, go." "Doc go?" "Doc go. Everyone calls me that." "Is Doc Go your last name or first name?" "Just Doc Go." She heaved a sigh and nodded. Fine, Mr. Doko. Don't forget to come here every day. I heard you were late a few days ago. Sion was worried about you. There's no need to worry. When someone who always shows up at the same time is late, of course you worry. So come every day and don't be late. Have a meal and maybe help with the cleaning like today. If you lose your Gao wallet again, let me know. Pardon? I'll find it for you, since I have no way to repay you. Are you saying you want me to lose my wallet again so that I can get your help? I thought you were a man of principle. She was teasing him, but he responded earnestly. No. Don't lose it. Whatever you need, just let me know. Mrs. Yom felt both pleased and depressed. Did always convenience seem so desperate that he thought she needed help, especially from someone like him? Or was he just trying to be kind? Either way, it was time to end the conversation. She looked pointedly at the soju bottle. Mr. Doko, maybe you should worry about helping yourself first. He bowed his head, dejected. The poor man was crushed so easily. The reason I'm offering you a meal is because I want to help you, even if it's a small gesture, but I can't let you drink here. He was silent. The lunchbox isn't a snack to have with your drink. It's a meal. I won't help you get drunk. One bottle isn't enough to do anything. It doesn't matter. I have rules. This patio table belongs to me, and I can't have you drink here. He swallowed silently, then gazed at the soju bottle and picked it up. For a second, she wondered if he might attack her with it. But he laid it on top of the empty lunchbox container, got up and trudged to the garbage and recycling bins. Quietly, she breathed a sigh of relief. He came back to the table, took out a ball of tissue from his jacket, wiped the surface, and bowed to her once more. Mrs. Yom watched him walk away. Doc go. Did it mean go doc, as in lonely? Or was he called Doc go because he lived alone? She told herself that for the time being, she wouldn't let herself worry about that lonesome figure. I'm really sorry, boss, but I have to quit before the end of the week, Seung-pil said, as soon as he arrived at the store for his overnight shift. Mrs. Yom was shocked. Running his hand through what was left of his thinning hair, Seung-pil explained he'd found work through an acquaintance as a driver for a small business. Since the new job started in 3 days, he had to quit the store as soon as possible. Then, with an apologetic look on his good-natured face, he asked for Mrs. Yom's understanding. Replacing him wouldn't be easy. Not many people wanted to work nights. Thanks to Seung-pil, she'd had peace of mind each night for the past year and a half, but that was about to change. Even if she found someone, the high turnover meant she'd always be looking for replacements. Mrs. Yom's head was already pounding, thinking of her life for the next little while, at least until she found a permanent solution. She tried to swallow her disappointment, reminding herself of her plan to be happy for Seung-pil when he left for another job. She thanked him, telling him how much peace of mind he had given her over the past while, and even mentioned she'd give him a small bonus. Looking visibly moved, he promised to give his best for the last 3 days. You're honestly so cool, Sion said, giving Mrs. Yom a thumbs up, as Seung-pil went to the back to change into his uniform vest. That goes for you too, Sion. Just focus on passing your government exam. If you pass, I'll buy you a nice work outfit, so study hard. Are you serious? Can I get something expensive? Don't you know it'll make a bad impression if a new hire shows up in expensive clothes? I'll buy you something decent. Just study hard. All right, boss. Anyway, I need to find someone for the night shift right away. You must have some friends who aren't working full-time. Can you ask if any of them would be willing to fill in? I'll also check with the young adult group at my church. Will I get commission if I find someone? Sure, but if you don't, you'll be the one working nights. Please, no. If we can't find someone in 3 days, either you or I will have to fill in. Mrs. O can't because of her son, so who else is there? But do you think this granny can work in the middle of the night and stock all the items?" She chuckled. Sion rolled her eyes at Mrs. Yom's dramatics. "I'll try to find someone. I know lots of kids who aren't working right now. Tell them what an amazing boss I am." Smiling, Sion rolled her eyes one last time before getting back to work. Mrs. Yom heaved a sigh as she watched countless boxes pour out of the truck. Why had she ordered so many products when business wasn't great? Frustrated with herself, she began to move the boxes that were piling up. At midnight, the delivery person dropped off the products in front of the door, and from there, it was the store's responsibility to move them to the storeroom. Her legs trembled after carrying a few boxes to the back. She sighed again, watching the delivery man put the last boxes on top of the stack and leave. Almost a week had passed since Seung-pil left, but she still hadn't found a replacement for the night shift. For the first 3 days, a young man from her church filled in. She knew he wasn't a permanent solution, since he was planning to enlist in the army in a few months, but he quit almost immediately, saying his parents disapproved of him working at a convenience store. The little rascal. She wondered how he would manage in the army with that attitude, but right now, she couldn't afford to worry about him. For the past 3 days, Mrs. Yom herself had been covering the night shifts. Sion had begged off with profuse apologies, saying she needed to attend a special last-minute lecture early in the morning in Noryangjin. Sly girl. Mrs. Yom was almost tempted to give Sion a pop quiz. As a former history teacher, she could have helped the girl, but Sion said she preferred to keep Mrs. Yom as a boss, not a teacher, and politely declined her offers. It occurred to Mrs. Yom that Sion might be wasting her time working at the store when she should be studying full-time. Mrs. Yom was doing it again, letting herself get distracted by other people's problems. She needed to focus on her own. She had called her son earlier that day, hoping he might fill in for the night shift, but the conversation ended with her losing her temper. The fool had 1, asked if she saw him as a deadbeat with nothing better to do. 2, stated that he, with his credentials, was overqualified to work at a convenience store. 3, recommended she just sell the store. And 4, proposed she invest in his new business and take it easy. Far from putting out the fire, the ill-advised phone call had only fanned the flames. After telling him he wouldn't be getting so much as a pack of gum from her store, she hung up. Then she drank a can of beer and crashed, only to be woken by the late-night alarm, reminding her to go to the store to relieve Sion from her shift. Her good-for-nothing son was driving her to drink. Was it okay for a devout woman to act this way? Why would God burden her with her son and a problem, and then give her alcohol if he didn't want her to drink? She didn't understand. By the time she moved all the boxes to the back and checked the inventory against the order list, it was past midnight. Now she had to display the new products. For 3 more hours, she shuffled between the storeroom, shelves, and cooler, like a squirrel carrying acorns. When she finally finished, it was 4 a.m. She yawned, leaning against the counter, struggling to keep her eyes open. Fortunately, there were no customers. She would have been in big trouble otherwise. But feeling relieved there were no customers, if that wasn't a sign the store was in trouble, what was? Just then, the chime sounded as a group of young people entered, cursing loudly. There were 2 girls and 2 boys in their early 20s, visibly drunk. The girls, one with bleached blonde hair and the other with purple hair, jabbered away, swearing constantly, while the boys swaggered next to them. Mrs. Yom was certain the girls weren't from the university. They'd probably wandered into the area after drinking at a bar near Namyong Station. Ah, fuck, they don't have Semanco ice waffles here. No, they do, the rice cake ones. I fucking hate those. Then go find ones without rice cakes, stupid. I'm gonna have a BB big. You guys know what Semanco means? Sa, as in fucking cheap, and manco, as in you get a shitload. You still looking for your dumb Semanco? Christ, where are all the BB bigs? I'm craving red bean. Mrs. Yom grimaced as she listened. Bite your tongue. Even if you say something, these delinquents won't listen anyway. Oh, they have babambar. Just eat this. Are you stupid? Babambar is chestnut. I said I wanted red bean. Then how about some shaved ice? It's right here. You expect me to eat shaved ice when it's fucking cold out, you shithead. What did you call me? You Students! Stop right there! Mrs. Yom yelled, losing her patience. She told them to mind their language, quickly pay for their items, and head straight home. Never one to tolerate foul language in young people. She couldn't bear their vulgarity another second. However, she'd made a mistake. They weren't her students. Neither were they well-behaved teens. The four of them advanced, turning feral before her eyes. The girl with blonde hair sidled up to the counter and spat on the floor. Hey, Granny, you a cat or something? How many lives you think you got? You're causing trouble. I have it all on camera, Mrs. Yom warned, trying to stay composed. The girl with purple hair slammed her ice waffle onto the counter. Ring it up, or your face is next. The girls cackled, looking ready to lunge at Mrs. Yom. The two boys snickered from behind them. Suddenly, anger surged through her. You know what? I'm not selling them to you. Get out. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. The blonde girl picked up a Semanco and tapped Mrs. Yom's head with it. Mrs. Yom was so shocked her eyes widened. She didn't know what to do. Granny, remember what you called us earlier? Students? Do we look like students to you? I swear old people think every young person is a student. Well, guess what? I don't go to school. I got expelled after beating the shit out of an old teacher like you. The blonde girl was about to tap Mrs. Yom's cheek with the ice waffle again when Mrs. Yom grabbed her wrist. You really want to get in trouble, don't you? Said Mrs. Yom. She squeezed the girl's wrist with all her might. The girl screamed and struggled to break free, but Mrs. Yom's grip was deceptively strong for a woman her age. When Mrs. Yom finally let go, the girl lost her balance and fell back, crashing onto the floor. The girl with purple hair grabbed Mrs. Yom by the shoulder. Without thinking, Mrs. Yom seized the girl's hair and yanked her head down onto the counter next to the ice cream. What did you say again? You're going to smash my face in? Is that how you talk to your elders? The girl struggled frantically, but Mrs. Yom gave her head a few good shakes before letting go. The girl was breathless and stunned. Seeing the boys' faces harden, Mrs. Yom hurriedly took the phone off the hook. If the landline phone stayed off the hook for some time, it automatically alerted the closest police station. You old bitch, do you really want to die? One of the boys charged toward the cash register, as if he meant to smash it to pieces. Mrs. Yom shrank back in shock. The boy grinned as he picked up the receiver and placed it back on the cradle. You think we've never worked at a convenience store before? Why'd you take it off the hook? You trying to call the police? Another mistake. She should have pressed the emergency button on the cash register instead. The boy saw the fear in her eyes and called out to the others, Get her, just take the video footage and the money. She felt her spine grow cold. She couldn't move. The boys began to shout in excitement, and the girls dashed to the register. Mrs. Yom was terrified. She stood frozen, her hands shaking. At that second, the chime sounded as the door was flung open. You bastards! A voice thundered. The teen's head spun around, and there was Dako's towering frame filling the doorway. She couldn't believe her eyes. How dare you treat your elders this way?" he roared. This intimidating figure looked nothing like the mumbling and sluggish homeless man she had met at Seoul Station. Mrs. Yom stared in awe, as if an army had come to her rescue. However, the delinquents didn't seem to see Doko the same way. "What the fuck? Oh, what's that smell?" "I think he's homeless. Fucking nasty, Jesus Christ." The boys rushed toward Doko, but he stood his ground, withstanding the attacks. He took the beatings with his whole body while blocking the door. When Doko continued to shield his face, the boy's punches grew more aggressive until he curled up in a ball in front of the door and remained motionless. She couldn't help him, so she did the only thing she could and pushed the emergency button. Almost immediately, however, she heard the wail of a siren growing closer. The girls noticed it first, and the boys looked startled. They tried to push Doko aside and flee, but he wouldn't budge, blocking the door with his hulking figure. "Fucking move, move, you piece of shit!" The boys stopped struggling when two men in uniform appeared. Only then was Mrs. Yom able to calm her racing heart. She saw Doko's broad back as he slowly got up to open the door for the police officers. Suddenly, he turned and offered her an expression that was half grin, half grimace, his face covered with blood. It was the first time she was seeing him smile. He didn't seem bothered by the blood at all. At the police station, the father of one of the teenagers arrived. The middle-aged man took one look at Doko's swollen, bloody face and proposed a settlement. Surprisingly, Doko requested something other than money. He walked up to the four teens, who still seemed drunk, and ordered them to kneel and face the corner with their hands raised above their heads. They hesitated at first, but when the father yelled at them, they obeyed, looking like elementary school students being punished. After leaving the police station, Mrs. Yom and Doko walked to the early morning market. They passed merchants preparing for the day and headed to a hangover soup joint down a side street. With Band-Aids covering his face, Doko shoveled Seonji's soup into his mouth while she barely touched her food, overwhelmed with worry and frustration. Kids these days are scary. "What were you thinking, challenging them like that?" she asked. "I told you. I can handle 2. He touched the Band-Aids as if they were badges of honor and smiled, showing his teeth. Mrs. Yom was about to continue when she realized she had challenged those same kids herself. She gave a bitter smile and studied him. "Thank you," she finally said. "So I earned my meal?" "Of course. But how did you know to show up right then?" "I heard you were working nights. I couldn't sleep. Got worried. So I came." I'm more worried about you, actually." Embarrassed, he scratched his head and spooned more soup into his mouth. "You walked in so confidently, I thought you must have been in a few fights in your youth. But I didn't expect you to just take a beating. Thank goodness that patrol car showed up when it did, or you could have been seriously hurt." "I called them." "What?" "There's a payphone there. I saw the kids causing trouble. So I called the police and walked in. I knew if I let them hit me for a bit, the police would come." Mrs. Yom's mouth dropped open. He wasn't just a man of principle, he was smart too. But more importantly, he had watched over her store and even taken blows on her behalf. She was suddenly overcome with admiration and gratitude. She looked at Doko, who had gone back to eating and scratching his head. "Do you want some soju?" His swollen eyes widened. "Really? But this will be your last. Come work at the store, but on one condition. You have to quit drinking." Me?" Doko asked, tilting his large head to the side. "I know you can do it. It'll get colder soon, but you can stay warm and make some money." She stared into his eyes, waiting for his answer. Daco looked away, his face twitching, as if caught in a dilemma. Finally, he lifted his small eyes to meet hers. "Why are you so nice to me?" "I'm just doing what you did for me. Besides, I can't work nights anymore. It's too hard and I get scared. You've got to do it. But you don't know me." "I do know. You're someone who helps me. I don't even know myself. How can you trust me?" "I've met thousands of students in my previous career. I've learned to be a good judge of character. If you stop drinking, you'll be fine." For some time, Daco stroked his beard and bit his lips. Asking him to work for her had been impulsive, but she already knew she'd be disappointed if he said no. She fought the urge to tell him to stop fiddling with his beard and just answer already. At last, he looked at her as if he'd made a decision. "One more bottle, then." "Quitting after one bottle is kind of unfair." "Fine, 2 bottles. After we finish here, I'll give you some money. Go to the bathhouse, clean yourself up, get a haircut, and buy some new clothes, okay? Then come to the store tonight." "Thank you." Mrs. Yam ordered 2 bottles. She twisted off the cap, poured him a shot, and poured herself one too. They sealed the employment contract with a toast. Chapter 2. Behind the Most Annoying Customer. It seemed only natural that Sion's final stop in her long sequence of part-time jobs would be at a convenience store. Not only was she a frequent convenience store customer, but she also discovered that the abilities acquired at her previous part-time jobs were easily transferable. The customer service and cashier skills she honed at the cosmetics store were almost identical to those needed at the convenience store, and her experience of sorting parcels at a courier company proved useful in managing merchandise. At the franchise coffee shop, she had learned to deal with difficult customers, internally referred to as PIAs, pains in the ass. This was further strengthened at a Korean BBQ restaurant, where she developed an even thicker skin by dealing with PIAs who blamed the staff for overcooking their meat when the customers themselves had grilled it. The convenience store was where all these tasks, scenarios, and PIAs came together. Sion started working at the store a year ago, completing her training in half a day. Since then, she has worked 8 hours a day, from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., while preparing to take her civil service exam. The main reason she has lasted this long was the store owner, who was a decent human being. The boss is the most important factor in determining how long part-timers stay, and the owner, a retired high school history teacher, represented the kind of adult Sion thought she could truly respect. These days, to avoid giving paid leave, convenience stores don't schedule their staff for 5 days a week. Instead, workers are offered only 2 or 3 days, making it impossible to live on just one job. But Sion's boss scheduled all her regular staff for 5 days a week. She was also clear about what they needed to do, as opposed to what she needed to do. She led by example and, most importantly, treated the employees with respect. Value your workers, and they'll value the customers. This was something Sion grew up hearing from her parents, who were veterans in the restaurant business. Ultimately, a store is about people. A store that fails to value its customers, much like a boss who fails to value their employees, is destined for the same outcome: failure. In this respect, the Cheongpa-dong convenience store was unlikely to fail. However, making money remained challenging. Recently, 2 other convenience stores had opened nearby, and in this neighborhood, with its large elderly population, local marts were preferred over convenience stores. The store's saving grace was its proximity to Sukmyung Women's University, but even this didn't offer much help, since Always Convenience was tucked away slightly off the main road. Only those students renting rooms in the neighborhood regularly frequented the store. Business being slow made work easier for Sion. How could she leave a job that offered so much to its staff? However, she couldn't help wanting to drum up more business for the owner, so she tried her best to serve each customer with care, hoping to attract regulars. And yet, despite all her skills and training, there was one PIA she couldn't stand. He was a recent regular, probably in his mid-40s and new to the area, skinny with bulging eyes and a foul temper. From his first visit, he had startled her with his rudeness, always tossing money onto the counter. He was condescending, barking commands and expecting immediate compliance as if she were a machine. He often pointed out her mistakes, allowing her no chance to rectify them and only adding to her frustration and resentment. Once, he turned up at the counter with the buy two, get one snacks a day after the promotion ended, and when the discount wasn't applied at checkout, anger flashed in his eyes. "Where's my discount?" "Sir, this promotion ended yesterday. I'm afraid the discount can't be applied." "Then why didn't you take down the sign? I picked these out specifically for the discount. How are you going to compensate me for the time I wasted? I demand a discount." "Sorry, but I can't do that. The promo period is written clearly on the sign. If you had checked, I don't have my reading glasses with me, so how am I supposed to read the tiny print? It's hard for anyone over 40. Are you ageist? As an apology, give me the discount now." "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." "Then forget the lousy snacks. I don't want them anyway. Just give me my cigarettes." "Which kind would you like?" "The same kind I always get. I buy my cigarettes here every day. If this is how you treat your regulars, no wonder business here sucks. Christ." Her first mistake was failing to remove the old promotion sign, and her second was losing her composure and asking him which cigarettes he wanted, even though she knew what he always got. To be fair, the first situation could have been avoided if he had brought his reading glasses, and the second was hardly a mistake. But the PIA used it all as an excuse to make Sion's life a living hell. After getting his cigarettes and hurling his money on the counter, he collected his change and sat at the patio table to smoke. Ignoring the no smoking sign, he flicked his cigarette butt on the ground. Always keen to point out the slightest faults in others but never willing to reflect on his own, this PIA was truly the worst. Between 8:00 and 9:00 p.m., whenever it was time for this PIA to show up, Sion would start to feel anxious. And from the moment the door chimed and he entered with his bulging goldfish eyes, her heart pounded until he paid for his things and left. She couldn't help feeling nervous as she wondered what trouble he'd caused that day. She told herself that all she had to do was make it past the hour when he came to get his cigarettes and snacks. One evening in late autumn, when Mrs. Yom walked into the store with a man, Sion was so shocked her mouth dropped open. For the first time, she realized just how much facial hair, or the lack of it, could drastically alter a man's appearance. Sure, she knew what a nice haircut could do for a person, but the moment she saw Daco, with his usual unkempt, weed-like mustache and beard neatly trimmed, she couldn't help but think he looked like a respectable uncle, not the homeless man she'd tried to avoid. With a fresh haircut and dressed in a loose shirt and jeans instead of his dirty windbreaker and trousers, he looked like a completely different person. Though his eyes were small, she couldn't deny that the high bridge of his nose, his well-groomed facial hair, and his strong jawline exuded masculinity. On top of that, his broad shoulders and back made him seem dependable, and now that he stood straight and confident instead of hunched over, he even looked taller. Dusting an invisible speck from his shoulder and presenting Daco as if he were a son who had just won a major prize, Mrs. Yom announced that he would be covering the night shift from now on. The boss couldn't be serious. Although Sion was impressed by Doko's transformation, her heart sank at the suggestion that she take on the responsibility of training him. But what choice did she have? She had to follow the boss's orders. Sion suggested that Mrs. Yom, with her extensive teaching experience, would be better suited. But Mrs. Yom wouldn't hear of it. She argued that young Sion had a better grasp of the point-of-sale system and customer service. And as a compromise, Mrs. Yom would take charge of training him on receiving midnight deliveries and managing merchandise displays. Sion reluctantly agreed. Together, they would bring Doko up to speed. After all, Mrs. Yom couldn't cover the night shift forever. To be honest, Sion wasn't particularly dependable or meticulous. More of a loner, she didn't have many friends. After college, she had decided to prepare for the entry-level civil service exam, only because the monotonous nature of that kind of job seemed to suit her personality. The problem was that everyone around her had the same idea. Lured by the promise of job security, her peers with stronger resumes and diverse experiences were also preparing for the exam, driving up the competition. She thought, "You're popular and outgoing, and you studied abroad. Why are you settling for a dull civil servant job when you could go for something more exciting? Shouldn't you leave these boring jobs for ordinary people like me?" Meanwhile, Mrs. Yom's convenience store gave Sion a glimpse of civil service life. Her routine included attending morning classes in Noryangjin, working at the store from afternoon to evening, and then returning to her home in Sadangdong. Her mother didn't understand why she had to travel all the way to Cheongpadong when there were closer stores. But to Sion, there was nothing more humiliating than running into people she knew while working at a neighborhood convenience store. Plus, a past crush had lived in this neighborhood. She'd met him here a couple of times, and so Cheongpadong held special memories for her. They'd even had a semi-date at the Waffle House, sharing a delicious strawberry shaved ice. He had abruptly gone on a working holiday to Australia and hadn't returned in years. For all she knew, he had settled down with a tall Australian woman or fallen in love with feeding baby kangaroos. Anyhow, the convenience store on the corner of a Cheongpadong side street has become her sanctuary. She has no intention of leaving until she passes her civil service exam. Especially after her dream of taking a working holiday in Japan fell through, she became even more determined to stay. Japan had seemed an obvious choice. She was a Japanese language graduate and anime fan, but the trade war between Japan and Korea that began in June made her plans impossible. Even her dream of traveling to small Japanese towns on weekends and holidays once she became a civil servant was shattered. Seeing her personal dreams crumble due to diplomatic issues made Sion realize she was part of society after all. She had believed she was different from those who cheered for soccer games or gathered in public squares to protest with candlelight. Her world existed within a computer monitor in the corner of her room. With just Netflix and the internet, she had everything she needed to access the world and enjoy life. And she found peace in her personal refuge, the convenience store. Sometimes she wondered if, deep down, she secretly wanted to work at the store forever and forget about the civil service exam. After all, wasn't working for the government just like working at a larger convenience store? Wasn't that a life where she would deal with bigger PIAs while serving the public? This place was her haven, and she needed to protect it. What this all meant was that she needed to help with Dako's transformation. She'd been happy to give him expired lunchboxes, but training and talking to him was a different story. First, she had to get used to his stuttering and sluggish movements, but more than anything, she had to put up with the lingering smell of homelessness that clung to him, no matter how much he showered. Doko worked hard to absorb everything Sion said, taking notes in an old notebook, wiping off the excess ink from his pen, and diligently writing down the proper way to greet customers. He even noted the rules for merchandise display, supplementing them with sketches. Touched by his effort, Sion patiently instructed him. When customers arrived, she nudged the hesitant Dokgo with her elbow, prompting him to greet them. He would then mumble, "Well, well, come." But customers never replied, mistaking his shy greetings as part of his conversation with Sion. Sighing, she led him to the cash register, demonstrating the checkout process while he stood beside her. However, he was far from ready to manage the register alone. "The boss will stay with you tonight, but you're on your own starting tomorrow, so make sure you remember everything." Got it. But to scan those two items together. Just trust the computer. Everything's already programmed. New products are automatically updated, so all you have to do is point the barcode scanner and scan. Just point and scan. And what do you scan? The products. Which part do you scan? That thing with the lines? The bar something? The barcode. Just aim at the barcode lines and scan, okay? Okay. Sion felt a flash of annoyance, but she was also proud of herself for teaching a man at least 20 years older than her. But most of all, she was pleased by the approving looks Mrs. Yom gave her while chatting with a friend at a table inside the store. Sion liked her boss. If she had met a teacher like Mrs. Yom during her school days, who knows? She might have become a history buff instead of an anime fan. In any case, she had to get this awkward, inexperienced man, freshly graduated from homelessness, to work the cash register on his own. Trying to tamp down her irritation, Sion shot a sharp glance at Dokgo, who was busy sketching barcodes in his notebook. The next day, when Sion stepped into the store after her class, Mrs. O hurried over to her from the counter. "Sion, what's with the bumbling fool?" Sion snickered, finding the outdated term unexpectedly fitting. Mrs. O wanted an explanation, as though she believed Sion was responsible for hiring Dokgo. Mrs. O always sounded accusatory, whether it was her nature or the result of dealing with her unruly son. She was aggressive and confrontational, even with customers. "Were you the one who recommended him? Who the heck is he? He can't do anything right, and he can barely get a word out without stuttering." "It wasn't me. The boss found him." Not wanting to elaborate further, Sion kept her expression neutral and headed to the storeroom. Mrs. O spoke respectfully only when speaking to the boss, who happened to be her neighbor and a fellow church member. She was very attached to Mrs. Yom, whom she affectionately called Ioni. This made sense, given that Mrs. O, despite what she thought of herself, was impatient and hot-tempered, not exactly suited for the service industry. So of course she would be devoted to the boss, who not only accepted her, but had also given her a job. As Sion emerged wearing her uniform vest, Mrs. O started grumbling again. Where on earth did she find him? She didn't say a word to me. "Sion, do you know anything? Come on, spit it out." "I really don't know." Sion decided not to say anything more. If she mentioned that Dokgo used to be homeless, Mrs. O would stay long after her shift, sticking to her like glue and complaining nonstop. Sion sighed. She longed for the day when she'd be able to start her shift without Mrs. O's endless chatter and probing questions. "I don't get it. It seems like she picked just anyone because the night shift's been tough, but I'm telling you, that guy looks like trouble. He'll probably get into fights with drunk customers, mess up the transactions, or maybe he's even planning to rob the store. We should let the boss know this is a bad idea." "I don't know. He doesn't seem like a bad person." "Who's bad from the start? Sion, you're too naive to see it, but you really need to watch out for these slow, unassuming types. The boss has only worked in a school, so she has no idea how many bad people are out there. He really doesn't seem dangerous, but I had a hard time trying to teach him how to use the cash register, which was frustrating. What can we do, though? There's no one to work the night shift right now. That's why I'm asking if you have any friends who aren't working right now. It was a mistake to engage. Mrs. O's questions weren't going to stop now. I don't have many friends. You're young. How can you have no friends? You need to get out more, live a little. Was she trying to pick a fight? Suppressing a flash of anger, Sion forced a bright smile. Mrs. O, what about your son? Didn't you recently say you were fed up with him sitting at home playing games all day? My son? He can't work here. He's prepping for the civil service exam these days. I don't know why he's even bothering with it. I told him he should try for the foreign service exam instead and become a diplomat. He sure has the brains for it. And Mrs. O for the victory. It was impossible to win against the woman. You know, diplomats are civil servants too, Sion muttered under her breath as she pretended to be busy with the monitor. Mrs. O went back to griping about the bumbling bear of a man, emphasizing that she was the one who really ran the store. Why is she unloading all of this on me instead of talking to the boss, who could actually do something about it? It seemed she was jealous of the kind treatment Mrs. Yum had been showing Sion lately and wanted to put her in her place. But why get competitive? They didn't even work the same shift. Sion made a decision right then and there. She would pass her civil service exam and say goodbye to the convenience store. She'd leave right after getting the satisfaction of seeing Mrs. O's son bomb the foreign service exam. Mrs. O wished her luck and rushed off, alone at last. Just as Sion let out a sigh of relief, a group of college girls walked in, lighting up the place with their chatter. Enjoy these years while they last, Sion thought. As soon as you graduate, it's job hunting and scraping by on a tiny wage like me. The thought made her feel older and depressed. 27 already, with no special skills, no money, no partner. Her youth was slipping away. 30 was just around the corner, the age she always saw as the end of the good times. Hello? Sion snapped back to reality. The 3 students were staring at her, their items spread out on the counter. Pushing worries about her approaching age aside, she focused on ringing up their things. He arrived for his shift. Winter was approaching, and not only was he lucky enough to spend his nights in a warm store instead of being out in the cold like before, but he also got free meals and a wage. He had truly hit the jackpot. As if he knew this himself, Dako rolled in just before 8, looking sharper than ever. He was supposed to keep shadowing Sion, learning how to greet customers and handle the register, until 10 o'clock when her shift ended. After that, he was to learn the night shift duties from the boss. Today marked his second day, and who knew how long it would take him to master everything? Sion, who was training him as a favor to Mrs. Yom, was already feeling her patience wearing thin, and he'd only been here a few minutes. As soon as he entered the store, instead of properly greeting her, he made a beeline for the storeroom. He came out moments later with a packet of instant coffee mix, poured it into a steaming cup of water, and drank it while gazing out the window. And it wasn't just any old coffee mix. It was a Kanu Black. It came from the boss's special stash, which neither Sion nor Mrs. O dared to touch. Yet here he was on his second day on the job, sipping it with elegance as if he were Gong Yu himself in those Kanu ads. It was unreal. Got so sleepy at night, so I kept drinking coffee. She said, "This was the best," Doko said, having wandered over to Sion at some point. Sion scoffed and barked. "Kanu Black is only for the boss because she's diabetic." He nodded and mumbled something. Thinking he was cursing under his breath, Sion snapped, "What did you just say?" "So that's why Boss told me to drink this." "Excuse me?" "Diabetes. It's common. With homeless people." "What did you say?" "Our diets are a mess. Bad kidneys." "Says who?" "An expert from a morning program. I watch TV at Seoul Station every day." She grunted in response. For the second time that day, Sion told herself to bite her tongue. Mrs. O talked too much, and Doko took forever to say the few things on his mind. Communication with either of them was a headache. She wanted to work with people who understood her. Why was the boss so big on giving people second chances? Was it because she used to be a teacher, or because she's a deacon at her church? Or did everyone grow more patient with age? At the sound of the chime, Sion gave Doko a look. Again, he muttered a belated, "Well, come." He gulped down his coffee and shuffled to the counter. Sion stepped aside, ready to observe him work the register, when it hit her. The man walking in was the PIA. She'd enjoyed a brief respite these last few days without him, as if a painful tooth had been plucked out. But now he was back, and he'd shown up during Doko's training. "It's the PIA," she whispered into Doko's ear. "Pay attention." "The PI what?" "Pain in the ass. I told you PIA stands for pain in the ass." "Ah, pain in the ass. Where is he?" "Shh, keep it down or he'll—" Before Sion could warn Doko, the PIA strolled up to the counter and tossed down a few snack bags. Doko clumsily held the barcode scanner like a monkey trying to use a smartphone and fumbled with a bag of chips, struggling to find the barcode on the colorful packaging. That was the mistake. He should have asked if the PIA wanted to purchase a bag. Whatever. Let's see how this goes, Sion thought, deciding to just watch. At last, Doko found the barcode, scanned the rest of the items, and stuttered out the total. The PIA glanced at Sion and grinned. He seemed to have figured out they were in the middle of training. "Cigarettes," he said. Doko looked at the PIA and tilted his head. I don't smoke. I didn't mean for you. For me." "Oh, cigarettes. So, what kind?" "So what kind? How dare you speak to a customer that way? How old are you?" I don't know." "You think you're real funny, don't you? Are you stupid or what?" "Nope." "So, what do you want?" Doko asked, still speaking informally. The PIA snorted and turned to look at Sion. Sion reached for the cigarette display, but the PIA held up his hand to stop her. Staring at Doko, he said, "Let's see if you're as stupid as you look. I want a pack of Essa Change 4 milligrams. Now." Essa was a brand with many varieties, so one needed to be careful. This was especially true for the Essie Change series, which included a wide range: Change, Change Up, Change Lin, Change Bing, Change Himalaya, and so on, which could be extremely confusing. For Sion, who didn't smoke, remembering all the different types of Essa cigarettes that customers requested had been challenging at first. The PIA, who usually smoked Dunhill 6 milligram, was purposely asking Doko for a difficult one. Doko plucked out the correct pack of Essa cigarettes from the display without any hesitation and scanned the barcode. The PIA, perhaps not wanting to be outdone, tossed his card down this time. Doko calmly picked it up, processed the payment, and handed it back to the PIA. "How about my bag?" the PIA asked, as if quizzing Doko. Sion resisted the urge to intervene. Doko looked from the items to the PIA and then grinned. "Just carry them home. Plastic bags are bad for the environment." The PIA's face hardened, and he leaned toward Doko as if challenging him. "I live far from here. How am I supposed to carry everything home without a bag?" "Then buy one. You should have asked me first. You expect me to put that on my card? Just give me one. Sorry. Can't do that. You're inconveniencing a customer and refusing to make things right. This is a convenience store, isn't it? He said sarcastically. At his half-mocking, half-threatening tone, Sion suddenly felt nervous. The situation was going out of control. She was about to step in, but Dokko suddenly clapped his hands. Then, to the amazement of both Sion and the PIA, Dokko went into the storeroom and came back with his own reusable bag, an old, dingy canvas bag stamped with some charity's logo. He dumped its contents on the counter next to the cash register. Pens, a notebook, and recently expired sandwiches tumbled out. Dokko began putting the PIA's purchases into the empty bag. The PIA scoffed, glaring at Dokko as if he were an animal. "What the hell are you doing?" "Use this to take your things." "You expect me to put my things in that nasty bag? If you wash it, it'll be fine." Sion couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. "I'm sorry. He's still in training. I'll put your things in a plastic bag." Sion reached for the reusable bag now filled with the PIA's items, but Dokko refused to let go of the bag. Ignoring Sion, he stretched out his arm, holding the bag right in front of the PIA's face. The PIA glared at Dokko for a long time, and Sion looked on helplessly. Dokko's small eyes, narrowed to slits, appeared especially cold, and his pursed lips and broad chin jutted out menacingly. He continued to stand there in silence, the bag dangling from his outstretched arm. Not sure what to do, Sion turned to look at the PIA. He was glaring at Dokko, his goldfish eyes practically popping out of his head. His initial shock quickly became annoyance. He snatched the bag from Dokko and left the store, holding it away from himself in disgust. Sion sagged with relief now that the standoff between the two men was over. Meanwhile, as if nothing had happened, Dokko simply went back to writing in his notebook. "Always ask if they'd like a bag first." Sion cleared her throat, trying to shake off the memory of how intimidating Dokko had looked. "Anyway, it was good you didn't give him the bag. I'm sorry, I forgot. You told me to ask. There's no need to be sorry. Just don't forget next time. And even though he's a PIA, you can't fight with customers. I can handle 2, no problem." She didn't know if he meant fighting 2 people or handling 2 customers at once, but his grinning face showed no trace of the intimidating figure she'd just seen. Sighing, she remembered what she'd been curious about. "Anyway, how did you manage to find the cigarettes so quickly? Last night, so many customers were buying cigarettes, I decided to just memorize them all. For Essa, there's Essa 1, Essa Special Gold, Essa Special Gold 1 Medium, Essa Special Gold 0.5, Essa Classic, Essa Sue 0.5, Essa Sue 0.1, Essa Golden Leaf, Essa Golden Leaf, He recited them like the multiplication tables. Stunned, Sion said nothing for a while before finally interrupting. "How did you memorize all that in one day?" "I had nothing to do during the night, and I kept getting sleepy." "Were you a smoker before?" I don't know." "You don't know if you used to smoke?" "I can't remember." "Do you have amnesia?" "My head got messed up. From drinking." "Then what can you remember?" "I don't know." "Geez." Sion regretted forgetting her earlier resolve to stay quiet. Despite her discomfort, she had to admit it was satisfying to see the PIA put in his place. Sion decided not to hold a grudge against Dokko for drinking the Kanu coffee. Even though her shift was almost over, the boss still hadn't shown up. Sion texted her and got a response. "I went to the Wednesday service and got home now. Starting tonight, Dokko will work alone." Sion texted, You think he's ready? And Mrs. Yum replied, What do you think? Sion started to text, thinking. Sion observed Doko stock the shelf with buldak hot chicken ramen, muttering the different varieties to himself. Nuclear buldak, cheese buldak, carbo, Nara buldak. She watched him squat down and mumble to himself while carefully lining up the noodle bowls with his hands. She texted the boss, yes. A week passed. Doko arrived at 8 o'clock sharp every night, always in the same outfit and with the same shuffling steps. But he had shed the fool part of his nickname. Though his actions were still slow, his stuttering had lessened, and he diligently carried out his tasks, cleaning both the outdoor and indoor tables, restocking empty shelves, taking the expired goods off the shelves, and even wiping down the walk-in cooler with a rag without being asked. He no longer needed any training. There was nothing more for Sion to teach him. He managed well on his own, which only prompted her to become more curious about him. Even though it was time for the evening rush, the store was unusually quiet, and Sion and Doko stood at the counter, eating gimbap with milk. "Where do you stay during the day, mister?" Sion asked, finishing her strawberry milk. He hurriedly swallowed his bite of gimbap and turned to her. "The boss gave me an advance. Got a small room in Dongjadong, across from Seoul Station. So you sleep there during the day and come here in the evening? Do you cook your meals there? The room is like a coffin. Once you lie down, that's it. After work, I eat the expired sandwiches on my way home. I sleep, then go to Seoul Station to watch TV and come here. Do you have to go to Seoul Station? What if you bump into your old buddies and get pulled back into that life? That won't happen. Seoul Station is where I watch TV and people. Your stutter's almost gone now. Does that mean your memory's coming back too? Are you starting to remember your home, family, your old job and stuff like that?" Doko paused for a moment, then shook his head. Then he stuffed the last 2 gimbap pieces into his mouth, picked up the milk carton, and sucked on the straw. Sion watched him lick his lips after finishing the milk and asked, "It's not bad working here, right?" "Everything's good, except that I can't drink." "Mister, you have a job, a place to sleep, and free food on top of that, so you shouldn't complain about not being able to drink. I can get a bed at the center, and I can eat for free at soup kitchens. But if I work, I can't drink. So I get these headaches. You're going through withdrawal, I get it. But staying off alcohol will make you feel better soon, okay?" He smiled at Sion, his eyes crinkling until they disappeared. His smile made her proud she'd been able to teach this older man everything she knew. "You've graduated. The boss said you've learned everything you need to know, so no more coming in at 8. Starting tomorrow, you can come in at 10. "Thank you. I learned a lot. It's all because of you." "Don't mention it. I'm serious. You have a knack. Everything you said just clicked in my head. You sure know how to flatter someone, don't you? You must have done pretty well for yourself in the past. I bet you couldn't stand me when I was telling you what to do. No. My mind's a complete blank. Totally empty, but you're a great teacher. If you don't believe me, post it online. How to use the POS system. You're really good at teaching that. Where in the world would I post that? On you. YookTube. You mean YouTube? Why would I do that? For people who need it, I'm sure they do. So you're saying I should post a tutorial on how to use the POS system on YouTube? It'll help people. There are so many convenience stores and so many part-timers. If you teach it the way you taught me, I've got enough on my plate. When I get home, I need to study. But you helped me. Because the boss told me to. I know, but still, you're a good teacher. Right then, Sion had an epiphany. She had genuinely helped this man, and it was something she could take pride in, something she hadn't felt for a long time, not until Daco came into her life. And that YouTube thing. I heard you can make money from it. I saw it on TV. Daco's eyes shone. Normally, she would have laughed, but she soon found herself deep in thought. Then she struggled to recall her YouTube login details, which she hadn't used in a long time. Hello, welcome to the second tutorial of learning the Always Convenience Store POS system, Sion said into a microphone she had bought online for 26,500 won. She spoke clearly while recording the cash register monitor with her phone. Last week, we covered the different parts of the POS system and their basic functions. Today, we're going to explore some of the more advanced features, such as how to process split transactions, handle returns, and top up transit cards. Why don't we start with split transactions? Let's say a customer brings a product to the counter, but they want to pay using both cash and card. Don't panic, just follow these steps. The camera shifted to show a chocolate bar on the counter. First, scan the barcode and check the price. It's 3,200 won. But the customer wants to pay 3,000 won in cash and 200 won by card. Some customers request multiple payment methods so that they can avoid carrying change. Start by entering 200 won in the POS as the amount received. This is the card payment. Next, insert the credit card and select Payment. This will charge 200 won to the card. Now, for the remaining 3,000 won, receive it in cash and press Payment again, and you're done. Pretty easy, right? After pausing the recording to catch her breath, Sion reviewed the content. The video showed only her hands, the POS, and the product, while her clear, calm voice explained the complicated payment process step by step. By describing every detail slowly, similar to how she'd taught Daco, she aimed to simplify things for those less familiar with the technology. Not being tech-savvy herself, she, too, had struggled with the POS system at first. Now, operating it was a breeze, and teaching it through video felt as straightforward as tossing expired lunches. She cleared her throat and resumed filming. Let's move on to processing returns. First, click Receipts on the POS. The response was unexpectedly positive. Of course, there were other tutorials on YouTube, one that kept cutting between a pretty face and the POS, leaving you unsure if the goal was to teach or to flaunt, and another produced like a game show, full of flashy graphics, subtitles, and music. Compared to those, Sion's videos were simple and plain, almost minimalist, but that aspect appealed to those seeking more practical tutorials. What mattered most was that Sion responded to every question from those new to working in convenience stores. Viewers appreciated Sion's video for her slow, methodical explanations. She presented the information as if teaching young students, making it easy to digest. Some comments described her low voice as soothing, putting listeners at ease rather than making them feel like they were in a lecture. Sion, curious, tried speaking aloud to herself, amazed that the voice she always found grating had a calming effect on others. Daco continued to arrive an hour early to sweep the floor and tidy the outdoor table before taking over the shift from Sion. He had fully adjusted to the night shift, and it was hard to believe that less than a month ago he had been a homeless man living at Seoul Station. The thick white jacket he'd purchased with his first paycheck made him look less like a fierce grizzly bear and more like the polar bear from a Coca-Cola ad, and his size made him a rock of dependability for both the boss and Sion. Just the day before, they had managed to quickly assemble and set up the Christmas tree, thanks to his help. Best of all, the nasty PIA hadn't shown his face around the store since his confrontation with Doko. It was typical of the PIA to bully those weaker than himself and cower before those stronger. Only Mrs. O still seemed bothered by Doko. Now her routine was to complain about him when Sion arrived for her shift. The older woman appeared to have chosen Doko as the target for her frustrations, but he didn't seem to care. Once, when Sion asked if Mrs. O stressed him out, he shook his head and gave a small smile. Stress is that. He pointed to the coolers in the back corner of the store. Pardon me. That liquor cooler. It's too close. You can't start drinking again. Seriously, Sion cried, raising her voice involuntarily. As if sensing her embarrassment over the outburst, Doko nodded. Actually, I have a plan, he said with a chuckle. Sion felt relieved. She now automatically restocked the Kanu coffee mixes Doko drank. Helping him had shown her the value in assisting others and made her realize she did have a special talent after all. Just yesterday, while filming her YouTube video, she found herself thinking of him. She moved and spoke in a calm, deliberate manner, as though she were instructing him. Maybe the key to helping people was to approach them more slowly, more patiently. It seemed that she, once an outcast disconnected from society, had finally found a sense of connection. The day before Christmas Eve, Sion received an unfamiliar email in the inbox linked to her YouTube account. A woman, claiming to run 2 Always convenience stores, expressed interest in working with her and left her phone number. What was this? A scouting offer? The idea of being scouted as a convenience store worker seemed far-fetched, and if she was being poached, why and for what exactly? A higher hourly pay? Or was she being asked to work at 2 places? Curiosity got the better of her, and she called the number. A middle-aged woman answered the phone. She said she had watched Sion's tutorials on YouTube and explained that she managed 2 convenience stores in the Dongjak district. Now she needed someone to oversee a new store she was opening and seemed to be offering Sion the manager position. Dumbfounded, Sion didn't know what to say. The woman suggested that Sion drop by the store to meet her in person and then decide if they could work together. To Sion's surprise, the store was very close to her home, and she agreed to visit the next day after her shift. The owner, in her late 50s and around the same age as Mrs. O, couldn't be any more different from her co-worker, Sion had to admit. She spoke calmly and wore a kind smile. She stressed her need for a dependable manager for the new store she was opening, as she was already managing 2 on her own. "How can you trust me with a whole store when you don't even know me?" Sion asked cautiously. She couldn't help feeling guarded. She had never received an offer like this before, let alone a compliment. "It was your YouTube videos," the woman explained. "I could tell by the way you speak and teach that you're more concerned about helping the learner than showing off your skills." "Really?" "Last month, I even trained a new part-timer by telling them to watch your videos, so I've already benefited from your help. How about you personally train our new employees at our stores? Maybe hold occasional training sessions at the new store as well. Of course, we'll cover your travel expenses." Sion bit her lip to hide her nervousness. The offer was for a store manager position. Hearing the salary, she gasped. Plus, the new store was just a 5-minute walk from her home. She had always dreaded running into people she knew while working as a convenience store clerk, but having them see her in a manager position was a completely different story. Now she could finally hold her head high. She decided to accept the offer. She would stay in the same industry but move up. As she walked home, she could feel the festive energy of Christmas Eve in the air. The brightly decorated streets bustled with couples, but even though she was single again this Christmas, she felt far from cold. Her new employer asked if she could start as soon as possible, as the new store would open in 10 days. It meant starting the new year with a new job. That evening, flush with a mix of excitement and worry, Sion waited for Mrs. Yom to arrive. The boss usually dropped by in the evening to review the day's business with Sion. Moving forward, she would need to get updates from someone else. When the boss walked in with a white paper bag, Sion felt extra guilty. "I bought some red bean buns. They're still hot. Let's have them together." Sion took one of the fish-shaped buns from the bag. She bit into the head resolutely, savoring the warmth that reminded her of Mrs. Yom's kindness. She then shared the entire story with the boss. Mrs. Yom stopped eating to listen to Sion. After she'd heard everything, she took another bite of her bun. "That's great. I'm sorry for quitting so suddenly." "No, it's good. I was worried I might be stuck with you forever. Honestly, it's a relief." She smiled. "You're just saying that." "You don't think I mean it?" "No." "Then I'll tell you the truth. I was actually considering letting you go. You know, our sales have been awful. Mrs. O and Doc O need more hours, so I was thinking of cutting your hours." "What?" "If sales drop, I have no choice but to cut back on staff. I can't lay off Mrs. O and Doc O since they rely on this job. But you have a home and exams coming up. As much as it would have pained me, letting you go seemed like the most logical option." "You're kidding, right?" "I'm serious. Please tell me you're joking or I'll be really hurt. You need to feel that hurt so you can leave without second thoughts. Once you're somewhere else, you'll miss this place and it'll miss you too. Missing something makes you appreciate it more, doesn't it?" "I already appreciate this place, you know." Tears started to well up in Sion's eyes. Her boss smiled warmly, biting down on her bun. Sion chewed, holding back her tears. The sweetness of the red bean paste tickled her taste buds. Chapter 3. The Secret in a Triangle. Gimbap. Oh Seon-suk had 3 men in her life she simply couldn't comprehend. The first was her husband. Throughout their 30 years of marriage, she could never predict his next move. She was stunned when he suddenly quit his stable job as a section chief at a reputable company. And later, again, when he abruptly left home without a word, abandoning the store he had worked so hard to establish and run for several years. He was stubborn and terrible at communication. When he later fell ill and returned home, Seon-suk tried to talk to him about his selfishness, looking for answers about where he had been and why he acted this way. But he remained silent. Frustrated, she kept questioning him until he disappeared once more. Left without answers or even any way of knowing if he was alive or dead, Seon-suk gave up. Now she no longer needed to understand him. The second man Seon-suk couldn't understand was her son. A cherished only child, he eventually became as unfathomable as her husband. At first, when he landed a corporate job straight out of university, she was thrilled that all her hard work had been rewarded. However, after just 14 months, he abruptly quit his prestigious job and ventured into stock trading, losing all his savings. His next move was to pursue film directing. He enrolled in a school where he mingled with questionable characters, then went into debt to produce an independent film that ended up being a total flop. He became depressed and eventually had to be hospitalized. Seon-suk couldn't understand why he would trade a stable life for high-risk pursuits like stock trading and filmmaking. Now, at her insistence, he had abandoned his fanciful ambitions and was reluctantly preparing for the Foreign Service exam. However, his face was still dark and troubled. and she worried he would relapse into depression. She knew it wasn't kind, but in those moments when her fear and frustration took over, it was hard for her to resist thinking, "Try lugging cement bags in the blazing sun, then see if you have any time to be depressed." These two men had made her life miserable, but now another confusing man had entered her life, Daco, a bumbling, bear-like fool who had started working nights at the convenience store a month ago. Initially, Seonsuk was shocked to learn that her boss had hired someone who had been homeless. But with Mrs. Yom struggling to cover the night shifts, there were simply no other options. They had to take whatever help they could get, leaving Seonsuk little room to complain. To her relief, Doko didn't cause any major problems and managed to keep the store safe through the night. He didn't smell particularly bad, and his appearance was reasonably presentable. "Don't you look nice?" Mrs. Yom would say to Doko, proud of the transformation he had undergone after she'd loaned him money to rent a room, buy clothes, and groom himself. But unlike Mrs. Yom, a lifelong teacher and the embodiment of positivity, Seonsuk held to one simple maxim: people never change. A rag, even if washed, was still a rag. Having run a bar stall in the past, she had dealt with all sorts of characters, including the 20-year-old part-timer who stole money from the register, and the 60-something regular who, after getting drunk and damaging property, pleaded for forgiveness, only to later badmouth her. As a result, Seonsuk trusted dogs more than people. Her dogs, Pretty and Blackie, showed her unwavering loyalty and devotion. There was no way you could make her believe that the bumbling fool who had only recently shed his homeless status would ever change, regardless of how much fancy garlic ham and mugwort drinks he consumed. Someone so antisocial and sluggish, with shifty, half-closed eyes, who struggled even to greet customers properly, could never truly fit in. However, the impossible happened. Over the course of a single week, Dako didn't just change. He transformed into an upstanding member of society. He mastered all aspects of convenience store work in just 3 days, and within another 3 days, he became nimbler, bowing at customers and at Seonsuk immediately upon making eye contact. How a man who'd once struggled to even look someone in the eye managed to adapt so quickly was beyond her. Doko was the third man in Seonsuk's life she couldn't understand. However, unlike with her husband and son, who both disappointed her with their inability to change, Doko's sudden and profound transformation utterly baffled Seonsuk. Could one small act of kindness really change someone so dramatically? If so, what in Doko's past made him able to adapt so quickly to his new life? Neither the boss nor Sion were having any luck uncovering his past. With most of his memories lost due to alcohol-induced dementia, they had nothing to go on. Even Doko was a name that didn't reveal much about who he really was or where he came from. "Think harder, since your memory seems to be coming back a bit," Seonsuk would prompt him. "I don't know. Thinking too hard makes my head hurt." Dako would scrub his face with his big hands. She couldn't understand why he showed no interest in uncovering his past. Wasn't it natural, once you'd put your life back together, to wonder about your previous life, what you used to do, if you had a family, or who you really were? To Seonsuk, his lack of curiosity meant that he was still a fool, nothing but a bumbling bear of a man. And since bears weren't like dogs, he remained incomprehensible to her. Unable to understand or trust Dako, Seonsuk kept her distance. However, the boss treated him as if he were a younger brother, and Sion was open and comfortable with him. Whenever Seonsuk asked the girl about Dako during their shift change, Sion maintained that he was perfectly normal. And though she didn't know what he did before becoming homeless, Sion speculated that he must have been quite successful. Successful, my foot. Just talking to him is frustrating. He barely stutters now. I read somewhere that not talking can dry out your vocal cords and make you stutter. When I trained him, he seemed lost at first, but he caught on fast. It took me 4 days to learn everything here, but he got it in just a day or two. He even memorized all the different kinds of cigarettes in 1 day. He's definitely a quick learner. German shepherds learn quickly, too. He's different. The way he acts sometimes shows real intuition, like he knows how to handle people. Look at how he deals with the PIAs, putting on that scary face. I bet he was a restaurant manager at some point. More like a small-time gangster with a few thugs under him. I did wonder if he was from that world, but it doesn't seem like it. He doesn't give off a criminal vibe. Yeah, because he stayed at Seoul Station instead of a prison. Being homeless isn't a crime. You shouldn't be so prejudiced, Mrs. O. Not all prejudices are bad, Sion. You have to be careful in this world. Sion looked like she might protest, so Seonsuk gave her a scowl that ended the conversation. The girl was too young to understand. In any case, both the boss and her young part-timer were too soft on people. Seonsuk needed to stay vigilant to make sure everything remained in order. One morning, after preparing her son's breakfast and heading to the store for her 8 a.m. shift, Seonsuk found Doko dozing behind the cash register. He snapped awake and bowed at her. She half-heartedly acknowledged his greeting and headed to the storeroom to put on her uniform vest. When she came out, Doko was still standing behind the register. It wasn't until she shooed him away like a fly that he yawned and left the counter. At the POS machine, she asked, "Any issues overnight?" "Nothing. Too special." "You sure?" He scratched his head and, after a pause, answered, "Nothing's sure. In life." Did he expect her to debate life's uncertainties with him? Letting out a snort at his philosophical response, she ignored him and completed her inventory check. However, that was only the beginning of Doko's puzzling behavior. Although his shift ended at 8, he always stayed back, walking up and down the aisles to line up the rows of products. She wasn't sure if it was some kind of compulsion, but he would spend nearly 30 minutes at eye level with the items, sweating to get everything perfect. Didn't he want to leave as soon as his shift ended, especially when the store was empty? He seemed to get into his tidying mode only after Seonsuk got behind the cash register. But he didn't stop there. He would then head outside with cleaning gear and wipe down the table and sweep around the entrance. Afterward, he'd sit on a bench outside with a snack of expired milk and bread, watching people going to work. Seonsuk figured Doko still hadn't shed his old homeless habits, and maybe he wasn't too eager to return to his little room. She shrugged it off, and before long, Doko would disappear, and the day would return to its normal, slow pace. When people walk into a convenience store, they don't usually think about whether the clerk at the counter is watching them, but more people steal than one might expect, either deliberately or on impulse. They tend to let their guard down, especially when someone like Seonsuk, an older, hefty woman who doesn't move too fast, is on duty. Thanks to all her years of dealing with customers, Seonsuk had a knack for spotting suspicious characters, like the kid who just walked in. It was winter break, and the store had been seeing more middle and high school students in the mornings. But this one didn't look like he even went to school. About 15 years old, maybe? About as tall as Seonsuk and wearing scruffy clothes, he looked like one of those troublemakers who loitered around Wonhyoro and the electronics market. The boy wandered through the aisles, occasionally glancing at Seonsuk. Seizing a moment when she appeared to be distracted, he quickly stuffed 2 triangle gimbap into his jacket. He then lingered between the aisles before finally approaching the counter. Quickly, Seonsuk contemplated her next move. Was it worth confronting a potentially armed delinquent over a couple of gimbap? But she couldn't stand the idea of being seen as a pushover. "Hey, lady, you got any zamong?" he asked. "What's zamong? We don't carry that," Seonsuk replied. The boy turned away, uninterested in her reply. She swiftly grabbed his arm with a practiced grip. He looked shocked, as if someone had smacked him from behind and tried to yank his arm free. "Empty your pockets," she said, fixing him with a glare. The boy stood motionless. "What do you take me for? Do it now." "Damn it," he muttered, reaching into his jacket with his other hand. Seonsuk tensed, fearing he might pull out a knife. To counter her anxiety, she tightened her hold on his arm. The boy produced a gimbap and placed it on the counter, but there was only one. "Take it all out," she demanded in a low, authoritative voice, just like when she scolded her dog Blackie. "Now, before I call the police." Then it happened. The boy reached back into his jacket and in one swift motion hurled the gimbap at her face. Thud. It hit her square between the eyebrows. Dazed and momentarily blinded, she let go of his arm. "Fuck!" he shouted. He tried to bolt out of the store, leaving Seonsuk behind with her face tingling. But someone blocked the glass door from outside. It was Doko. "Hey, Zamong," Doko said, smiling at the boy as he stepped inside. The boy, unsure of what to do, started backing away. Doko casually slung an arm around him in a congenial gesture and approached Seonsuk. Powerless, the boy allowed himself to be escorted to the front of the cash register. Recovering her composure, Seonsuk stepped out from behind the counter. This rascal, he forgot to pay for his stuff, didn't he? "Forgot? Yeah, right," Seonsuk yelled. "Take him to the police station this instant." The boy hung his head, with Doko's arm firmly around his shoulders. "Don't tell me you know this kid," said Seonsuk, fuming. "This is Zamong, always asking for something we don't sell. He usually comes during my shift. Seems he was late today. Hey, Zamong, didn't your stomach wake you up today? Or did you sleep in?" Doko spoke to the boy as if to a friend, while the boy pursed his lips and looked away. What was happening here? Had he been stealing all this time under Doko's watch? No, the numbers at the register had always added up. Then had the fool been secretly helping this kid all along? The admiration Seonsuk felt for Doko's timely intervention quickly turned to anger. "You've been letting him get away with stealing? Tell me the truth right now." "He hasn't been stealing," Doko replied. "I don't believe you. He tried to leave without paying, and he threw the gimbap at me." Doko turned and stood the boy up straight. He glanced at him, then at the crushed gimbap on the floor beside Seonsuk before bending down to pick it up. "Hey, is that true?" "Yeah, so what?" "That's not okay." Seonsuk grew more infuriated as she listened to their calm exchange. She was the victim, yet here they were, sorting things out on their own. Doko turned to her, holding out the gimbap he'd picked up from the floor along with the one from the counter. What now? "Please ring these up," she scoffed, but when Doko continued to hold out the two gimbap, she scanned them with the barcode reader. Doko reached into his pocket and fished out a crumpled 5,001 bill. She accepted it as if it were a used tissue, placed it in the register, and gave him his change. Still, Doko stood in front of her, the gimbap in his outstretched hand, refusing to lower it. "You can leave now," she said. "We're not finished." "Now throw these," Doko said, nodding toward the boy. Was he suggesting that she do what the boy had done? She was dumbfounded. Doko's grave expression, combined with the sight of the kid standing behind him, looking as defeated as a prisoner awaiting his fate, left her speechless. "Go on. Doko urged. Things were getting out of hand. Seonsuk realized she needed to stop this nonsense. "Do you really think I'd throw food at him?" she shrieked. "Do whatever you want. Eat them or toss them. I don't care." Doko chuckled. Was he laughing at her? He turned the boy around to face Seonsuk. "You've been forgiven. Apologize. Now." The boy lowered his head further, showing Seonsuk the cowlick on his crown. "I'm sorry," he said in a small voice. Seonsuk waved them off. Like a father with his son, Doko draped his arm around the boy's shoulders, and they exited the store. They settled at the outdoor table and began unwrapping the plastic from the gimbap. She watched as they smiled and ate together. What had happened just now? The real victim here was her, having been robbed and hit in the face with a rice ball. Yet because Doko had resolved everything so quickly, she never got the chance to fully express her anger. Typically, she would have been seething with rage, ranting about it to anyone who would listen, but surprisingly, her anger just faded away. She was surprised to discover she didn't have much to say. She watched Doko and Zamong eat their gimbap breakfast together. Clearly, Doko had been looking after Zamong all along, which explained why the rebellious boy listened to him without question. She felt something strange stir within her, a mix of relief, forgiveness, and a kind of excitement. For some strange reason, the fact that she'd been part of this bizarre drama amused her. She even considered grabbing her own triangle gimbap and joining them. Seonsuk, despite feeling a headache coming on, couldn't help but find the change refreshingly pleasant. In short, she felt good. As time went on, Seonsuk noticed that her frustration and bafflement with Doko had disappeared, replaced with an odd sense of well-being. And it wasn't just her. The store's general mood in the morning was gradually changing, like the shifting rays of the sun. Elderly women, who usually preferred to shop at cheaper corner stores or local markets, started coming into the store as if on an outing. They would tap Doko on the back while he cleaned, peppering him with questions. He would then guide them around the aisles, pointing out BOGO or B2GO deals. "If you buy these together, you can get them for cheap," he would explain. "It's a great deal." "So these end up being cheaper than at the market," one of the women noted. "I guess convenience stores aren't always overpriced. It's so nice that this man shows us all these deals. We can barely read the fine print. How are we supposed to know about these discounts?" Grinning broadly, Doko would carry their baskets full of items to the counter and set them down in front of Seonsuk. His expression reminded her of a golden retriever expecting a treat for fetching a ball. After she rang up the purchases, to her surprise, he would leave with the women, returning with the empty baskets a short while later. When she asked where he'd gone, he explained he'd helped carry their heavy baskets home. What kind of full service was this? Seonsuk was flabbergasted, but she couldn't deny that Doko's dedication to the elderly had boosted the store's morning sales. And with school on break, these grandmothers would bring their grandchildren, who were experts at getting them to open their wallets for snacks and drinks. When Mrs. Yam noticed the improved morning numbers, Seonsuk took all the credit, boasting about how hard she'd worked to boost sales while keeping quiet about Doko's kindness to the neighborhood grandmothers and their grandkids. Of course, her conscience kicked in, so she started being a little friendlier to Doko. "Are you still feeding that kid? He hasn't shown up again while I've been working." "No, he doesn't come anymore. He said he was going back home." "You believe that? I heard kids who run away from home these days all live together in some basement." I checked. It was empty. What was empty? The basement, where Zamong and the others were living. "Huh? Why'd you go there?" "I got worried." but they'd all left. They're not there anymore. It's good you're thinking about those kids, but shouldn't you find a proper place for yourself first? I don't need a home. That's why they call me homeless. But you're not homeless anymore, and you have a job you work hard at. I have. A long way to go. A long way to go where? A long way. To everything. How can you be so modest? You know I'm sorry for misunderstanding you all this time, right? No, I'm the one who's sorry. I'm sorry for making you misunderstand. Anyway, you should find a studio and move. You need a proper place to sleep. Thank you for your advice. He nodded meekly and sauntered home, 4 hours after his shift had ended. Thanks to the store's increased sales and her lighter workload, Seonsuk began to trust him. It was around this time that the bear-like man started to remind her more of the dogs she trusted than the men she couldn't understand. As the year-end approached, Mrs. Yam announced that Sion was being scouted by another convenience store in the franchise and suggested adjusting their shifts. Scouted? While Doko was offering free deliveries, Sion was getting scouted. These part-timers were something else. Seonsuk, feeling the need to keep things in check, gladly accepted Mrs. Yam's request for her to work more hours. Sion's hours were split between Doko, Mrs. Yam, and her, and she ended up working 2 hours longer than usual each day. With the start of the new year and her increased workload, she tried to stay energetic, but aging another year seemed to take its toll, quickly leaving her exhausted. Her home was becoming more of a mess, and with her coming home 2 hours later, her son often made instant noodles for himself without cleaning up afterward. Though he claimed to be studying, the loud gaming sounds coming from his room suggested otherwise, which broke her heart. In a nutshell, her son was only adding to the chaos at home. While she was out working, he was making no contribution to their lives. Seonsuk didn't expect him to help with the housework or be the perfect son. She just wished he would do something to improve his situation. But as the new year came and she grew more tired, her son remained an immature 30-year-old child. He seemed resentful for having been a model student in school and not being able to enjoy his teenage years, and now he wanted to relive his life as a delinquent. The fact that a 30-year-old preparing for an exam was addicted to shooting games like a teenager was truly exasperating. Fed up, she knocked on his door, but it seemed he couldn't hear her over the noise. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked. The handle felt as cold and indifferent as her son, who only came to her when he needed something. Anger surging, she banged on the door. "Son, open up! I need to talk to you!" It wasn't until her knocking and yelling grew louder than the game that he finally opened the door, looking sullen. "I know what you're going to say, so don't," he snapped, his tone as sharp as the gunfire from his game. His face was greasy and dirty, and his belly hung over his shorts. He painted a pathetic picture, wearing shorts in the dead of winter because he stayed cooped up inside with the heater blasting. Gone was the smartly dressed professional. Now he was a deadbeat. He tried to retreat, ignoring the scorn on her face, but Seonsuk grabbed his arm so tightly that her nails dug into his skin. Startled, he looked back at her, and she gripped his arm even harder, determined to confront him. "Let me go. I need to study." "Stop lying to me. What are you doing in there?" "You told me to study for the Foreign Service exam. What's wrong with playing a few games during a break? Do you think I'm still a child? I went to a top university and worked for a major company. I know what I'm doing, so stop bothering me." "You ungrateful brat. Is this what you worked so hard for? To end up like this, holed up in your room, gaming and living off ramen? Why don't you go for a walk sometimes or move into a study dorm?" "God, I'm so sick of your constant nagging," he yelled, wrenching his arm free. He slammed the door shut. When she heard the click of the lock, something inside her snapped. She started banging on the door as if she intended to break it down, pounding the door in response to the way his eyes had flashed at her, as if he thought she'd lost her mind. But the only answer she received was the rising volume of gunshots from his game. When the pounding made her hand throb, she began to bang her forehead against the door. Thud, 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 thud. When her forehead grew numb, she finally gave up and turned away. Tears streamed down her face, and her heart ached, but there was no husband to share this burden. She couldn't even turn to her friends. How could she, when she had always boasted about her son? The distant echoes of her classmates' gossip, the ones who had envied her when her son was hired at a major company, seemed to ring in her ears. Even after crying herself to sleep, she woke up at 7 as usual. Incredibly, the sounds of gaming were still coming from her son's room. She threw on her coat and left the house without making breakfast, desperate to escape. But the only place she could go to was work. When she stepped inside the store, Dogo wasn't at the counter. She turned around and saw that he was lining up a new display of noodle bowls. Even though she had told him it wasn't necessary, he obsessively aligned each product. His behavior was in stark contrast to her hopeless son. "Hello," Doko greeted her. Seonsuke couldn't respond properly as tears suddenly filled her eyes. She rushed to the storeroom and changed into her uniform, but the tears wouldn't stop. Her son's situation seemed worse than that of a middle-aged man who had only recently escaped homelessness. No, Doko was now a respectable member of society, wasn't he? In contrast, her son was addicted to games, a lost soul with a bleak future. He was just like his father, and if something were to happen to Seonsuke, she feared he might end up homeless or a vagrant. These thoughts overwhelmed her until she sank to the floor, sobbing. When she finally came to her senses, she saw Doko standing at the storeroom door, watching her. He walked over and offered his hand. She took it and stood up. He then handed her some tissues, which she used to wipe her tears and nose. Feeling as if a dam inside her had broken, she took deep breaths to calm herself. Doko led her out of the storeroom, where the bright morning light was streaming in through the large window. He went to the cooler and brought back a bottle of corn silk tea. "Corn silk tea's the best when you're upset," he said, pouring her a cup. Puzzled, Seonsuke gazed at the kindness placed before her. She needed something to quell her rising emotions. She gulped it down like a cold beer on a hot summer day. Once her thirst was quenched, she couldn't hold back any longer. Doko listened intently as if he had been waiting for her to open up. Standing at the counter, Seonsuke poured out her woes about her pathetic son, wiping away tears, while Doko listened and nodded. "I don't get it. Why would he throw away a perfectly good job and waste his life on ridiculous things? Aren't stocks and movie production the same as gambling? Where did my son go wrong? He's still young. He's 30 and a total deadbeat. Have you tried talking to him? He won't listen. He just brushes me off. I've tried so many times, but he shuts me out and now he's avoiding me. To him, I'm nothing but a maid and landlord. First, listen to your son. You say he doesn't listen, but sounds like you don't listen to him either. What do you mean? You're listening to me right now. Try listening to him too. Ask him why he quit his job, why he got into stocks, why he made a movie. Stuff like that. What's the point? He's already ruined everything. I told you he won't even talk to me. But there must have been a time when he tried to tell you. It's been 3 years. When he said he was quitting his job, I lost it. I mean, why leave a perfectly good job, right? So do you know why? He quit? I told you I don't. Ask him again. Find out why. Why? It was hard for him. Only your son knows. You should know too, since it's about him. I blew up because I was scared. I told him to tough it out, but he went ahead and quit anyway, just like his dad when he walked out on us. Seonsuk poured out her story, her eyes welling up again. She tried to hold back her tears, worried about how she might look to Dako. He paused, his cheeks twitching, then offered her a gentle smile. You were scared. He'd turn out like his dad. Seonsuk's tears stopped. She found herself nodding. You're right. I thought my son would be different. Maybe it's my fault. I did everything I could, but he just doesn't see it. He's always holed up in his room playing games, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Dako handed her some more tissues. She quickly wiped her tears as a customer entered. Dako retreated to the storeroom while Seonsuk composed herself and stepped behind the counter to help the customer. Once the customer left and Dako returned, Seonsuk, now calmer, smiled sheepishly at him. I went on quite a bit, didn't I? I've been struggling and I didn't have anyone to talk to. I feel better now after telling you everything. Thank you. That's it. Huh? When someone listens, it makes you feel better. Seonsuk's eyes widened as she took in his words. Try listening to your son. It'll make things better, even if it's just a bit. It was then that Seonsuk realized she had never truly listened to her son. She'd always wanted him to live as she wanted, without ever hearing his struggles or understanding why he strayed from the path she'd planned. She'd been too focused on scolding him for his mistakes to see why he made those choices. Here. Dako placed a set of 3 triangle gimbap on the counter, a B2GO deal. Seonsuk stared, puzzled. For your son, he said with a smile. For my son? Why? Zamong says, triangle gimbap's the best when you're gaming. Give it to him while he plays. Seonsuk stared at the triangle gimbap. Her son had always liked them. When she first started working at the store, he'd asked her to bring back the ones they couldn't sell. But at some point, Seonsuk had stopped. She hadn't liked seeing him eat them alone in his room, absorbed in his games. As she looked on, lost in thought, Doko's murmur reached her ears. But these aren't enough. Write him a letter. Add it to the gimbap. Seonsuk looked up. Doko was gazing straight at her, and at that moment he really did seem like a golden retriever. Write him, and tell him you didn't listen before. But you will now. Ask him to tell you, and give these with the letter. Seonsuk bit her lip, gazing at the gimbap before her. Dako pulled out 3 crumpled 1,001 bills from his pocket. They're on me. Please scan them. As if following a command, Seonsuk moved the barcode reader over the gimbap. When she heard the beep and the machine's voice announce, "Transaction completed," she felt a sense of peace settle over the chaos in her mind. Seonsuk, who once trusted dogs more than people, nodded at Dako, who smiled and turned to leave the store. As the door chimed, Seonsuk began to think about what she would write to her son. Chapter 4. The Kindness of Buy One. Get One. In Kyungman's mind, the convenience store was like a bird feeder. Off to the feeder again, he would think, seeing himself as the bird. When he was young, there was a hit song called Day of a Sparrow. Song Chang-sik, in his famous warbling voice, compared ordinary people to sparrows, offering comfort for life struggles. Dawn is breaking. Today, once again, I go out to get my grain. Dawn is breaking. Even when he was a young boy in elementary school, the words had resonated with Kyungman, and he'd often found himself humming along. Not much had changed since then. He still felt like that boy who dreaded school, viewing life as an endless series of days to endure. While to some, solitary drinking seemed romantic or trendy, for Kyungmin, it was simply a bottle of soju consumed alone at the convenience store's patio table while braving the cold wind. Romantic, my foot. He considered himself lucky not to receive disdainful looks from those passing by. He couldn't pinpoint when the table at Always Convenience became his private watering hole. When the colder weather set in, he would stop for a bowl of instant noodles before heading home. Like most late-night snacks, that routine soon expanded, first to include a triangle gimbap, then some stir-fried kimchi, and finally a bottle of Jinro soju, creating a proper feast. Kyungmin became a regular, a bird that couldn't escape the feeder, warming his insides with 5,000 won's worth of drinks and side dishes every night. The cold soju and hot soup always heated him up from the inside. The variety of noodle bowls and triangle gimbap offered endless combinations that never grew dull. Tonight it was so, a favorite for the past few months. Somyeon noodles, Soboro triangle gimbap, and soju. Not only an unbeatable way to end his day, but also a budget-friendly choice for his solo drinking sessions. Tonight, however, an intimidating new man stood behind the counter, practically the opposite of the previous worker, who'd been like the roly-poly Anpanman. Kyungmin awkwardly placed his soju bottle, noodle bowl, and gimbap on the counter, and the man rang them up slowly, as if he had all the time in the world. "That'll be 5,200 won," he said in a gruff voice. Kyungmin quickly paid and grabbed some wooden chopsticks before heading out to the table. He set the food down and took out the paper cup he always carried for soju. Now, all that remained was to prepare the somyeon. As he peeled off the noodle lid, he made the mistake of glancing inside the store and made eye contact with the bear-like man. He quickly looked away and tore open the soup mix. Going back inside for hot water, he thought about the previous worker who had been there until last week. Likely a retiree who was working part-time, he had a round face and clean-shaven head, which had made Kyungmin nickname him Anpanman. Anpanman had been very kind, handing him wooden chopsticks with the instant noodles and wishing him bon appétit every time. Sometimes he'd even offered Kyungmin sandwiches slightly past their expiry date for free, assuring him they were perfectly fine to eat. Kyungmin had cherished those moments of peaceful camaraderie during the quiet hours, a shared understanding between individuals battling life on the front lines. So who was this new man who had taken Anpanman's place? Kyungmin pondered this as he waited for his noodles to cook. The man's gruff manner, his apparent inexperience in customer service, and his aloof, almost haughty gaze, as if he judged Kyungmin for his solitary drinking. This was someone accustomed to authority. That was it. He was the convenience store boss, no different from the CEO of Kyungmin's company, who made his life a living hell. Perhaps the man at the counter had fired Anpanman due to declining business. Lacking a better alternative, he'd employed a neighborhood grandma for a few days, but it obviously hadn't worked out, so he'd had no choice but to step in himself. Kyungmin guessed that Anpanman was let go just shy of his 1-year mark so that the boss wouldn't have to fork over severance pay. His own company always laid off temps around the 11th month, regardless of their performance. Kyungmin started to develop a nice buzz. He blew on the hot noodles and washed a mouthful down with a shot of soju, thinking about bosses. The economy had been in the dumps for ages, and work was perpetually challenging. His CEO, citing financial difficulties, had scrapped the bonuses for Chuseok, only to upgrade to a new luxury car. Meanwhile, Kyungmin's salary had been frozen for 4 years, a topic of ridicule among his juniors. Treated as expendable, yet financially unable to resign, he viewed his CEO as a dictator, and it wasn't like he could escape this hell when he went home. With his twins entering middle school next year, the family expenses were going up, and his wife, burdened with part-time work and household responsibilities, had little time for him. The warmth, security, and support one expected to feel at home had vanished, and even soju had been cut from his regular nightcap and late-night snacks for quite some time. His wife refused to let him drink at home, convinced it was bad for the children to be around alcohol. Even his one hobby, watching baseball highlights, was off-limits now that the kids had claimed control of the TV remote. Overworked and underpaid, he couldn't fully devote himself to his family, nor could he command their respect with his paltry salary. Kyungmin felt like a failure, certain he would grow old as an insignificant husband and a dull father. No, if he got fired and couldn't find another job, even this fragile existence would crumble. Where did it all go wrong? He had done his best for the past 44 years. After graduating from an unremarkable college, he had ventured into a challenging field, pharmaceutical sales. He then went on to insurance, automotive, paper, and medical equipment sales, accumulating experience without ever straying from his path. Born without privilege, he had leaned on sincerity and kindness as his core strengths. When he married his wife, a former client 4 years his junior, and they welcomed twins into the world, he believed that his modest life was beautiful and precious, that affluence didn't matter. However, time revealed a harsher reality. Those who'd had a head start in life continued to prosper, amassing skills and wealth, while Kyungmin felt like a soldier in the trenches who had run out of ammunition and was now forced to charge into an open battlefield. No matter how much he earned, expenses always soared, while his energy drained away. His physical stamina, the bedrock of his sincerity and kindness, ebbed with age, turning these virtues into incompetence and subservience. Even his mental strength began to erode until his boss and co-workers lost respect for him. Lost in these bitter thoughts, he drank and drank until he realized he had only half a shot left. The egg block in his noodles hadn't fully dissolved, and he was almost out of soju, a real dilemma. But another bottle would make tomorrow unbearable. Gone were the days of his youth, when he could down 3 or 4 bottles and head to work without a hangover. These days, more than a bottle meant he might vomit on the subway during the morning rush. Resilience. That's what he had lost. In his younger years, he could bounce back from mistakes and shake off hangovers with a hot shower. Now that resilience was fading like everything else. Kyungmin swallowed the final bite of gimbap, slurped down the remaining noodles, and knocked back the last of his soju. After savoring his only moment of freedom that day, he tidied up and left. The next night, the bear-like man rang up Kyungmin's items with the same indifference. This time, however, he promptly included the chopsticks. He was a fast learner. Maybe that's why he'd been able to become a convenience store owner, despite being no older than Anpaman. He likely led a comfortable life, having built his wealth early while others his age faced layoffs. Kyungmin guessed he now managed several stores, stepping in for part-timers as needed. Feeling a mix of envy and helplessness, Kyungmin completed the one small ritual that still brought him some pleasure. The owner was still watching him. How did he view Kyungmin? Probably as a loser, a struggling family man. But it didn't matter. He was still a customer, a model one in fact, who spent 5,000 won every day and cleaned up after himself. The owner's gaze felt oppressive, but Kyungmin was determined not to relinquish his place in this corner of the world. More than a month passed this way. The year was drawing to a close. Damn it. In 2019, not only was there no promotion, but Kyung-min would be lucky to avoid a salary cut. He was already panicking about his daughter starting middle school in March, and his wife had begun cautiously mentioning that the girls would need to attend more cram schools. On these cold nights, drinking soju at the outdoor table seemed to be the only way Kyung-min could relieve his stress. He wasn't sure exactly when the owner came and sat down at the table. Had he dozed off, huddled over from the cold, fatigue, and alcohol? When he opened his eyes, the boss was sitting in front of him, a polar bear in his white jacket, his breath visible in the chilly air. "Hey, mister, if you fall asleep here, you'll freeze to death." The boss was treating Kyung-min as if he were homeless. He felt a surge of anger, but intimidated by the owner's size and presence, he quietly poured the rest of the soju into his paper cup. "Drinking doesn't keep the cold away," said the owner in his usual halting way. Kyung-min wasn't sure if the owner was simply distracted or being casually bourgeois, but either way, his manner of speaking got on his nerves. Kyung-min emptied his cup. "Well, I feel warmer. I'll be off after I finish this, so no need to rush me," he said in a small act of defiance as he reached for the soju bottle. But the bottle was empty. Embarrassment and annoyance swept over him. He couldn't drink more even if he wanted to, and he especially didn't want to appear weak before this man. But right then, the owner said, "Just a moment," and disappeared into the store. What now? He returned with 2 large coffee cups. Kyung-min watched in surprise as the man placed 1 cup in front of him. It was filled with a light amber liquid and 2 ice cubes, oddly resembling whiskey. Kyung-min was convinced it was whiskey, but why? Could it be poisoned? He eyed the owner warily. The man gestured for Kyung-min to drink, then took a sip from his own cup leisurely, an action that seemed all too familiar to him. It reminded Kyung-min of his days in pharmaceutical sales, watching doctors and professors casually drinking whiskey bombs as though they were barley tea. When Kyung-min remained motionless, the man picked up his cup and finished it, leaving only the ice cubes. "Kaya?" He licked his lips in satisfaction, prompting Kyung-min to finally drink his own cup, which he finished in one go. The cold liquid seemed to freeze his esophagus and chest. Unlike whiskey, there was no burning sensation, only a chilling cold. Refreshing, isn't it? What is this? It's corn. Silk tea. It's good. When you're upset. Corn silk tea with ice? Kyung-min was shocked. The color makes it feel like you're drinking. And it's also good for settling your stomach. Kyung-min couldn't tell if the man was simply awed or mocking him. However, he couldn't exactly be angry about being offered a non-alcoholic beverage. He forced himself to nod and began tidying up. "I used to drink. Every day, too," the man murmured. Kyung-min paused, suddenly more aware of the man before him, and sat back down. "When I drank every day, everything started to fall apart. My body, my head." He trailed off. Kyung-min felt uneasy. He was the one drinking, yet the other man was the one acting drunk. As he prepared to leave, he quickly asked, "So what are you saying? That I should stop coming here?" The man reached into his jacket. Was he pulling out a knife? Kyung-min tensed, but instead, the man brought out a bottle of corn silk tea and held it up. "Drink corn silk tea instead." "Here, have some more," he said, unscrewing the cap. He poured the tea into their cups, which now contained nothing but ice, as if Kyung-min were an old drinking buddy. To Kyung-min's disbelief, the man then raised his cup for a toast. What the hell was this? Out of habit, Kyung-min bumped his cup slightly lower than the man's and downed it in one gulp. The drink was cold. "I think the alcohol I used to drink was this color," the man said, setting down his cup. "You're probably right. And you probably drank plenty of whiskey, made a boatload of money, and now, as a boss, you're looking after your health and enjoying your second act. But now, this is all I drink. You can live without alcohol. Are you telling me I should quit drinking?" The man nodded, his expression blank. A surge of irritation shot through Kyungmin. "Why don't you just tell me to stop coming here? Why are you telling me to quit drinking?" "I want to help." "I'll bring you this tea with ice. Have it with your noodles and gimbap. Then you won't think about drinking anymore. Have I ever caused any trouble here? Or left a mess? I always clean up after myself. What kind of help are you talking about? If you don't want me to come, just say so." Kyungmin stood up and walked away without looking back. Let that nut job clean up the table himself. It felt like a business relationship that had ended. There was no longer any need to make a good impression or care. He couldn't tell if the cold tea was clearing his head or if the chilly night air was waking him up. As confusion swirled, Kyungmin tried to stifle the sadness of losing his little haven. By the end of the year, with constant work dinners, Kyungmin came home drunk every other day. He didn't miss drinking alone at the convenience store. Even when he passed by on his way home from the subway station, he gave it only a cursory glance through bleary eyes. He walked past the deserted outdoor table, satisfied that the boss had lost him as a customer. The year 2020 arrived. People ditched the old year, as if tossing dirty clothes into the wash and slipping into fresh ones. His wife and the twins, on the brink of middle school, welcomed the new year with energy. The twins had grown to his shoulders, and he realized he'd soon be the shortest in the family. Before marriage, both he and his wife had been 5'5", but while she stayed the same, his latest health check revealed he'd apparently shrunk to 5'4". His shrinking height wasn't the only issue. Every new year chipped away at his self-esteem. He faced humiliations at work and a growing sense of alienation at home. Sure, quitting his job might restore some of his wounded pride, but he didn't know how to fix feeling invisible at home. What if he quit his job and left home? He'd probably end up homeless. This year, Kyungmin's goal was to leave his thankless job and find something new. His wife would worry, but he longed to work in a place where he'd be treated decently, even if it meant earning less. Then again, a smaller paycheck might mean he'd be treated worse at home. To him, the new year just felt like an extension of the same old winter. Wasn't January 2020 just as cold as December 2019? He couldn't understand people's feverish excitement for the new year and shook his head at the relentless New Year's marketing everywhere. He was itching for a drink. But of his 3 drinking buddies, 2 had made New Year's resolutions to quit alcohol, and the 3rd had returned to his hometown to take up farming. Even the work party to kick off the new year was in line with the times. Everyone just wanted to have lunch, having already partied hard at the year-end bash. Kyungmin felt like the whole world was leaving him behind. His sense of loneliness and isolation only fueled his craving for alcohol. An outcast always drinks alone, but he didn't have the budget or the heart to splurge on solo drinking at a bar. Frustratingly, the only place in his area that kept its outdoor table during winter was always convenience, with that oddball owner in the polar bear jacket who sipped corn silk tea like it was whiskey. The guy was such a weirdo that he didn't even hire a night shift worker and kept watch over the store himself. Damn it, shouldn't an owner be creating jobs? Grumbling, he was about to walk past the store when he stopped. To his surprise, there was a bowl of instant somyeon sitting on the outdoor table. Oh, how he missed so. It seemed like the only thing that could comfort him in this dreary, monotonous new year. So had the power to throw open the doors to a fresh start. He couldn't resist. Even if the noodle bowl was bait set by the polar bear to lure him in, Kyungmin didn't care. Telling himself that if the polar bear decided to crash his so drinking session, he'd figure out a way to fend him off. He went inside, grabbed his gimbap and soju, and filled the noodle bowl with hot water. "Ah, long time no see," the owner said, as he leisurely rang up the items. Kyungmin nodded silently and quickly stepped outside. Unfazed by the cold, he closed the lid on the noodles to let them cook, tore open the triangle gimbap, and unscrewed the cap of the soju bottle. Damn it, he didn't have a cup. He had recently removed the little paper cups he used for soju from his bag. It was annoying to buy new ones, and he certainly wasn't going to ask the polar bear for help. Fine. Who needed a cup anyway? He could just drink straight from the bottle, right? Just then, the owner came outside. Kyungmin, trying to act nonchalant, was startled by what appeared to be a fan in the man's hand. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a dish heater. The owner plugged it into an outlet Kyungmin hadn't noticed before and placed it beside him, turning it on. Confused, Kyungmin watched as the owner gestured for him to enjoy the warmth before heading back inside. Despite his bewilderment, the heater's warmth began to thaw Kyungmin's frozen expression. Whether his face was stiff from the winter wind or from embarrassment, it quickly relaxed. "I've got only this cup here." The polar bear came back out, offering a paper coffee cup. Kyungmin silently accepted it. He felt he needed to say something. "Thank you." For what? For the cup. And the heater. "You didn't come for a while, so I thought I wouldn't get to use it." "You mean the heater?" "I got it because you used to sit out here. I figured you weren't coming because of the cold, so I got one. Anyway, I'm glad you came." Despite his usual gruff manner, the polar bear's words were even warmer than the heater. He disappeared inside as Kyungmin continued to drink, unaware his noodles were getting mushy. Everything was warm: the soju, the cup, and the heater the owner had purchased just for him. Kyungmin may have been an outcast elsewhere, but not here. Here, it turned out, he was welcome. He felt like a VIP making a comeback. He quickly finished the so. He wanted to linger in the warmth, but forced himself to get up just as the owner appeared again, as if expecting something. In one hand, he held a paper cup, presumably with ice, and in the other, a bottle of corn silk tea. Oh my God. Still, the owner was at least 10 years older, so Kyungmin felt obliged to show some respect. He figured he just needed to drink one round, like he would with a client. Kyungmin held the cup with both hands, accepting the tea. "It's tough, isn't it?" Kyungmin nodded, but the owner, rubbing his chin with his large hand, asked, "What kind of work? Keeps you out this late?" Wait, he does me a favor and now he's prying into my life? "I work in sales." "Sales? What do you sell?" "It's not like you can buy what I'm selling." "Medical equipment." "Medical equipment? So you supply hospitals?" "Why? Do you own a hospital or something?" "Yes, we do." "Then it must be tough. You're the breadwinner, right? When I look at you, I can sense the weight of responsibility." "Now you want to get into my personal life too? Isn't this crossing a line, mister?" "Sir, you seem like the breadwinner yourself," Kyungmin said. "Life's not easy. If you get off work this late, you must hardly see your kids. Let me guess. You have a daughter at home." "What is he? A fortune teller?" To be fair, he had a 50-50 chance of getting that right. 2 daughters. That's great. Daughters are the best. The owner rubbed his face with his thick hands. For some reason, the gesture seemed lonely, and Kyungmin's irritation softened. Almost instinctively, he pulled out his wallet. Inside, there was a photo of his twin daughters, grinning with shiny teeth, taken when they had just entered elementary school 6 years ago. He saw this picture more often than he saw them in person these days. "They're so lovely. I can't tell who's who," the man said. "They're twins." "Ah, I see. That's why you work so hard, for these lovely girls. Don't all parents do that? Being a parent, it's tough, isn't it?" "Yes." Even though Kyungmin knew these were leading questions, he felt compelled to respond. Like a dam breaking, words started pouring out of him uncontrollably. He talked about his daughters, soon-to-be middle schoolers who barely spoke to him, his wife's constant complaints, the diminishing respect at work, and finally the humiliations he faced in client meetings. As if confessing, Kyungmin told the man everything, impassioned, spittle flying. The man poured him another cup of corn silk tea. Thirsty, Kyungmin gulped it down. He felt refreshed inside, but soon a wave of embarrassment hit. "It's not easy to quit your job," the owner said, "and you don't get enough time with your family, and no way to ease the pain. So that's why you drink here after work." "Yes." "Then drink corn silk tea instead." "Pardon me?" "Quit drinking and have corn silk tea instead. Didn't your wife ban alcohol at home? If you drink corn silk tea, you won't feel guilty and you can enjoy a late-night snack at home with your family." "What are you talking about? I quit drinking too, just 2 months ago. This made it possible." The man acted as if he had invented the beverage himself and tried to pour Kyungmin some more. However, Kyungmin quickly stood up, grabbing his bag. "Thank you," he said, bowing before leaving, but the man's voice followed him. "When you don't drink, you're fresh the next day, and you become more productive." "Obviously, my productivity goes up, then my salary, then my position, and I hit the jackpot. Who doesn't know that? What a load of bull crap. Why don't you go drown in your beloved corn silk tea?" After that ridiculous conversation, Kyungman started taking the long way home to avoid the polar bear at the convenience store. It meant climbing 10 more steps and passing through a dark alley where the snow still hadn't melted. But it was worth it as long as he didn't have to see that preachy old man's face. He vowed never to drink at that convenience store again. But without always convenience, he now had nowhere to go. He tried a few cheap bars, but their seedy atmosphere only worsened his mood. And none of the other convenience stores in the neighborhood put out their outdoor tables until spring. Screw it. Kyungmin decided to go straight home without drinking. When he arrived before 11, without the smell of alcohol on him, his wife and daughters, initially surprised, quickly became supportive of what they assumed was a New Year's resolution to quit drinking. A New Year's resolution to quit drinking? They had misunderstood, but even so, their support felt good. He decided he might as well quit drinking. That made him eager to get home earlier, and soon he forgot about drinking alone. Instead of watching baseball, he started watching TV programs after work with his family, discovering many interesting shows. Particularly on Wednesdays, he made sure he was home early to watch Let's Eat Dinner Together. His older daughter lamented that the show never visited Cheongpa-dong and wished co-host Kang Ho-dong would come to their house dressed as Santa Claus. The younger one, born 5 minutes after her sister, preferred the other co-host, Lee Kyung-kyu. She often asked for Don Chicken after seeing the ad featuring him as Don Quixote. On such days, even his wife didn't mind ordering fried chicken, and the daughters were happy to have Dad home so they could enjoy the food together. Were they happy about the fried chicken or about him? It didn't matter. Biting into the chicken together, that was what family was all about. That year, during the Lunar New Year holiday, Kyungmin didn't touch a drop of alcohol even when they visited his parents. His father and uncles, who usually got drunk and played Ghost Stop during the holidays, treated him as if he were being pretentious, but his wife and mother smiled warmly. A few days later, on his way home from work late at night, Kyungmin found himself taking the shortcut that passed by the convenience store. Now, walking past the store no longer triggered his craving for a drink, and his steps felt almost natural. Still, he couldn't help glancing toward the store, curious if the polar bear was still working the night shift, unable to find a part-timer. There was no one at the counter. Only a bottle of corn silk tea sat on the outdoor table. What an interesting man the polar bear is, Kyungmin thought. He stared at the bottle for a moment, then picked it up and went inside. Ding dong. The store was empty, eerily quiet. Kyungmin felt an irresistible urge to drink the corn silk tea, but there was no one at the counter. It felt more like an inconvenience store than a convenience store. Just then, the polar bear emerged from the storeroom, stretching as if waking from hibernation. He spotted Kyungmin, grinned, and made his way to the counter. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Kyungmin figured he should say something and asked, "How have you been?" "Fine. How about you?" "Good, thanks to you." An awkward silence followed. Kyungmin finally put down the bottle of corn silk tea. "How much is it?" "It's on the house." "Why?" "I left it out for you." "But why?" "Well, I told you before, corn silk tea is as addictive as the alcohol," the man said with a grin. "If you drink 2 or 3 a day, it's good for our sales. So it's basically bait." It sounded ridiculous, but Kyungmin decided to play along. "Well, thank you," Kyungmin said with a polite nod. "And why don't you buy these instead?" the man added, pointing. Kyungmin turned to see a display of Lucker chocolates right in front of the counter. "Yes, those," the man continued. "We're having a buy one, get one deal on them right now." Sure enough, there was a 1+1 sticker next to the chocolates. Kyungmin placed 2 on the counter as instructed. The loveliest girls in Cheongpadong. 2 identical lovely girls. "They really like these," the man said in his casual tone while ringing up the purchase. But Kyungmin's heart raced. He handed over his card, his mouth suddenly dry. They used to buy these all the time. But recently, they've just been getting the BOGO chocolate milk. So I asked them, "Don't you girls like these anymore?" "And what did they say?" Kyungmin asked, trying to sound calm. One of them, don't know if it was the older or younger one, said it wasn't a BOGO deal anymore. Kyungmin didn't say anything. The man handed him back his card. Kyungmin barely managed to take it, speechless. "So, I tested them," the man said slowly. "I said, 'Kids, these don't cost that much. Ask your mom to get them for you.' And do you know what they said?" "What did they say?" Kyungmin asked, feeling like he might suffocate from how slowly the man spoke. "They said their mother told them, 'Since Dad works hard to make money, you should save and only buy things on buy one, get one deals.' That's what they said. Gosh, so smart with money. Such good heads on their shoulders. I thought, whoever raised them did a great job." Kyungmin was moved by how much his family cared for him. "Starting yesterday, these chocolates are back on a BOGO deal, so you can get them today. And tomorrow, tell your daughters to come and buy them." Seeing the tears rolling down Kyungmin's face, the man let out a chuckle and tapped the counter a few times. Kyungmin wiped his tears with his coat sleeve, bowed to the man, and opened his wallet to put his card away. Inside his wallet, his daughters' smiling faces looked back at him. his very own buy one, get one deal. Chapter 5. When Convenience Becomes Inconvenience. Life was a series of problems to be solved. In-kyung trudged along a sidewalk that was too worn and bumpy for wheeling luggage. Her trunk rattled behind her as she scanned her surroundings. Today's main objective was to find her winter accommodation. Fortunately, securing a place to stay wasn't the problem. She'd already done that. Now she had to figure out where it was. For someone with a poor sense of direction, navigating the intricate alleys of Seoul's older neighborhoods was no easy feat. She had used her map app to get from Namyong Station to Cheongpa Church, but after turning onto a back street behind the church, her iPhone shut down. Winter was coming, and with it, her ancient iPhone went into unexpected hibernation, further complicating her quest. Now she couldn't even call for directions. Shh! Biting back a curse, In-kyung realized she needed to ask for help. Spotting a convenience store at a small three-way intersection between side streets, In-kyung mustered her remaining energy and dragged her trunk there. Wouldn't a convenience store offer some convenience? She left her trunk near the doors and grabbed a chocolate bar from a display. Behind the counter, a tall woman in her 20s stood watching her. In-kyung paid for the chocolate, tore open the wrapper, and bit into it. The sugar hit helped steady her trembling limbs, exhausted from dragging the luggage. Under the clerk's gaze, she polished off the entire bar. Then, as casually as she could, she asked, "Could I make a quick phone call?" The clerk consented, and In-kyung bowed gratefully. She awkwardly laid her trunk down on the floor and opened it. Thankfully, she'd written the number in her notebook. Dialing from the store's landline, she introduced herself to the young woman who answered and explained that she'd had to call from the convenience store because her phone battery was dead. Convenience store? Are you at Always by any chance? When In-kyung said yes, the girl on the phone laughed, saying she was on the 3rd floor of the low-rise building right across from the store. In-kyung hung up and peered outside. A 3rd-floor window slid open, and a girl, face beaming with a familiar smile, waved at her. In-kyung had spent the autumn at the Park Kyungni-toji Cultural Center in Wonju, a facility established by the late author of the renowned novel Toji's Park Kyungni. The center was designed to support future generations of writers and artists by offering them a space to work, as well as 3 meals a day, free of charge. It was In-kyung's first visit as a writer, and there she planned to bring her writing career to a close. She had moved out of her rental in Daehongno, Seoul's theater district, sent all her belongings to her parents' house, and arrived at the center with just one trunk. Nestled in the woods of a quiet village on the outskirts of Wonju, the center was a hidden retreat for writers, an ideal place for solitude, free from distractions. There, she took daily walks along trails perfect for clearing and organizing her thoughts, and enjoyed meals made from healthy ingredients. The center's quiet rhythm was a refreshing change, with each writer moving in their own orbit, exchanging cautious glances with one another. While some enjoyed table tennis after lunch or gathered for makgeolli by the stream after dinner, In-kyung, usually outgoing, chose solitude. She had come with one purpose in mind: to quit writing for good if she couldn't manage to write there. However, spending time alone didn't make writing any easier, but she wasn't overly anxious either. Writing had always been a challenge, and even if she finished something, there was no guarantee it would make it to the stage, so she simply endured. She asked herself if she could continue living as a playwright, and these thoughts deepened with the autumn leaves. After about 3 weeks at the center, Hui-soo approached her. A seasoned novelist and literature professor from a university in Gwangju, Hui-soo was on sabbatical. visiting literary centers at home and abroad, with the Toji Cultural Center as her last stop. She had taken particular notice of In Kyung, who, like a hermit, had holed up in the writing room, wrestling with the potential end of her career. Coming to a writer's retreat to give up on writing. Sounds like something out of a book, or maybe some absurdist play. It's just, I'm out of options. I think I've hit my limit. I've kept my head down and worked hard to push through, but to be honest, I'm worn out. Then take a break. Park Kyung-ni once said that even if the writers here look like they're not working and just goofing off, it's all part of the process, so let them be. Let go of what's weighing you down and just think about your work while you rest. Remember, mindless typing isn't the same as writing. Thank you, Professor. I've never had any formal training in writing, so I really appreciate your advice. Oh, please, just call me Huisu, and next time you go for a walk, don't go alone. Let's go together, okay? That's how Huishu had comforted In Kyung on their first walk. After that, they often walked together, strolling along the lake pathway on the Yonsei University campus near the center and exploring nearby forest trails. By the end of their residency, they even climbed Mount Chiak together, and In Kyung felt she had gained a true friend she was reluctant to part with. A week before leaving the center, Huisu asked where In Kyung was headed next. In Kyung admitted that, despite writing little during her stay, she felt recharged and planned to return to Seoul to find a new place to write. She'd put her retirement as a writer on temporary hold, and if that was her only achievement during the residency, so be it. Since her dreams had started in Seoul, she was determined to realize them there. Huisu nodded in understanding. So where are you planning to stay while you write? Huisu asked. In Kyung was thinking about checking into a goshiwon. Since she lacked both money and resolve, a small dorm seemed like her only option. She said that if she couldn't produce something over the winter, she would quit for good and return to her hometown in Busan, where she could join the family business at Bupyeong Kangtong Market or work at friends' shops. Her parents would probably set her up on dates with potential suitors, and if she didn't resist, marriage and children would most likely follow. If I go home, I can do everything. Except write, In Kyung said shyly, to which Huisu responded with an awkward smile. The next day, Huisu asked In Kyung if she would consider staying somewhere other than a goshiwon. She offered her daughter's empty apartment near Sukmyung Women's University, as her daughter was coming home to Gwangju for the winter break. Noting the surprise on In Kyung's face, Huisu explained that the apartment would only be available for 3 months, since her daughter would return to school in March. She hoped In Kyung could use the space to write comfortably, offering it for free, as if In Kyung were doing her a favor. Touched by the professor's generosity, In Kyung, usually stoic, nearly broke down in tears. She beamed at the professor in response. It felt like she'd been given another writing retreat, one that might again become her last. And this place that could mark the end of her life in Seoul, as a writer and as a theater person, was an apartment on the 3rd floor of a low-rise in Cheongpa-dong, Yongsan. My mom said to show you around the neighborhood, Huisu's daughter said when she met In Kyung at the door. But my boyfriend's coming soon to drive me to Gwangju. Sorry. That's okay. I can manage. I'll make sure to keep the place clean. Great.